IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. That's Ryan Roberts. I'm Brian Driscoll. And Ryan, I am ready to rock and roll, man. I went from last night being like, I have no idea what to talk about today because I covered a lot of topics in yesterday's show. And I said, look, man, to me throwing my back out, all this stuff in my house, got some business stuff going on. I'm tapped out on topics. I was like, what do you want to talk about? And Ryan said, you know what? Let's do like a buy, sell, or hold for the show. And I was like, I thought about it for a second. I was like, dude, that could be fun, right? So I came up with some topics, and then he was like, well, how about we kick it off and kind of have the people on the board do it? It's like, well, we'll come up with some, they'll come up with some, but they came up with a lot of them. So we're gonna have some fun with a buy, sell, and hold today. The original plan was to do spring buy, sell, or hold, and that was what was in the instructions. But some of you didn't read instructions, so we had a lot of 2024 season buy, sell, or hold questions. So what we're going to do is we're going to do spring first, go offense, then defense, and we got a couple, team recruiting questions we'll dive into, and then we will do the team ones that people threw out there because they're, even though it was like that's not what we told you guys to do, the questions were still awesome. So I was like, okay, let's dive into these. So we're gonna have some fun today, breaking down into 3 segments, and this is going to be questions from Irish Breakdown Premium Board members only. So this is going to be from the people that put these questions onto the thread on the premium message board. So it doesn't mean we won't answer some questions, but from the chat, but that'll be super chats and things like that. So we're not going to do a mailbag today. We're going to stick to this, Ryan, because this is going to be a lot of fun. And I'm, like I said, I'm really fired up. You came, even though you're wearing a Philly shirt, at least you're wearing the old school Philly shirt. Pete Rose won a World Series in one of those, so I can live with it a little bit. So you ready to roll, man?
Yeah, man, absolutely. It's
it.
for people that aren't on the premium message board, one, you should go to boards.irishbreakdown.com and you should sign up. But if you're in the chat and you don't want to, or you don't have the means to do so, you can still engage in the conversation and the topics of today's show. So feel free to engage, please.
Yes, because we want to hear your guys' opinions on these buy, sell, or hold. That's that's partly what makes this stuff fun. So Ryan, what we'll do is we'll start off with the questions from our members. We'll go pretty much in order. And then at the end, there's a couple questions a couple buy, sell, holds that we wanted to have that weren't specifically asked in the chat. So we'll get to those as well. But we're going to start off with offense, then go defense, some team recruiting stuff, and then we'll do the big picture one. So let's start off today's show with the offense of buy, sell, or hold. The first set of questions are going to be spring storylines, kind of what we're going to see in the spring. And Buddy Gabrick started us off, Ryan. And Buddy is buy, sell, or hold. We have 2 of them that are kind of on the same plane, so I'll ask both of them. We'll go one at a time, though. The first one is specific. Buddy Gabrick says Sullivan Absher beats out either Pat Coogan or Tosh Baker for a starting job.
Man, I wish I could buy it, Buddy, but for now I'm going to sell it. I don't, for one, I think that eventually, I don't know if it'll happen this offseason or not, but I do think eventually Sullivan is going to fit inside because I just think his body type, his temperament, his physicality, I just all think that plays a little better inside. Not that he can't play offensive tackle, which is obviously where he's been at Notre Dame so far, but I think he could be a tremendous asset inside a guard potentially. So I hope that he's so good this spring that he gets an opportunity to compete inside potentially. I really hope that happens. But I'm going to sell it for now just based upon I think that justified or not, I do think that Pat Coogan has trust from Joe Rudolph, and I think that he will get the early shot at this. I think if that does happen, that's more of a fall camp situation and leading up to fall camp than a spring situation because spring is a little bit more of what we know and then letting some young guys try to compete to find spots in the spring. So I'm going to sell it for now, but I hope at some point we are talking about that situation.
Agree. The follow-up one was from Hayden32, and you've kind of already answered it, Ryan. Now, I want to say this first. One of my favorite shows I watch is a political show, and they do a weekly buy, sell, or hold, but they call the show buy, sell, or hold. But then they say if you hold, you have to do something very inappropriate, and they say it's like a violation of the dude code. Holds are okay here. They are not a violation of the dude code if they are explained appropriately. If it's used as a cop-out, then I may have to, dude code violation. But as long as there's a legitimate justification, holds are okay on a limited scope. but we're gonna be bold here.
So we're allowed what, two holds? Two holds through the show
Yes.
then, and then
Say
we're no
one
more holds
hold on
after that?
both sides of the ball and then one hold
Okay.
in the team one. So you get one. It's
Sounds
it's
good.
kind of like your lifeline, right? I'm gonna agree
Okay.
with you, right? I'm gonna sell that. I think you nailed it. I think that's more of a fall camp thing. But here's a follow-up
Yep.
that was not Sullivan, and you kind of answered it. So say it again from Hayden 32. One of the young guys pushes Pat Coogan out of the starting guard spot.
I would be more willing to buy that one. But again, if we're talking about spring centric, I would still sell it just because I don't think it's going to happen in this duration, right? I do think it can happen though. If someone has a
Yeah.
great off season and they lead up and it's just like that kid is getting it mentally finally, it's clicking, and he's just a little bit more talented than Pat Coogan. Like he's just more talented overall. I think that could happen this offseason leading up into the fall, but I just don't think that we're going to necessarily see that type of movement in the spring. I just don't. I just think it's a little too quick. I think it's a little bit too. Joe Rudolph's been now with Pat Coogan for his going on to his second year. Like he just knows him a little bit better, so I think that trust is just going to be there a little bit.
I would have taken by here if one word in the question was different. Hayden asks, one of the young guys pushes Pat Coogan out of the starting guard spot. If the answer would have said pushes Pat Coogan for the starting guard spot, I would have bought it. Because that's to your point, Ryan. It's a push to where now when we go into the fall, let's see what happens.
Right.
So I would have bought.
Because the movement's going to start next month if that does happen, right? It's not going to be a situation where it's like Pat is number one and nobody else is even close, and then all of a sudden they just completely cut the gap in the off season, into the conditioning and working into the fall. If it's going to happen, you're going to start to see it in the spring as far as at least guys cutting the gap a little bit in that battle. Yeah,
which is exactly what we saw last spring. I mean, it was. Billy Schrouth was that number one guy for most of the spring, and Pat Coogan was the number two. And then all of a sudden, fall camp, we get there, and it's Pat Coogan's number one. So to your point, here's a fun one, a little add-on, Ryan. If you had to pick one young player, because I could say, hey, look, depending on I could see Rocco Spindler being the guy that pushes Pat Coogan out of the lineup too. Rocco's able to come back healthy, and Billy Schrouth locks down the spot. It could be an older guy too. So I don't want to completely dismiss Rocco Spindler from this conversation. I just don't know where he's going to be in the spring because he did have a knee injury in November. That's a quick turnaround for a 320-pound guy to be back in March. So we'll see how that is. But in the fall, that'll be a different conversation. But if you had to pick one young guy that if Pat Coogan is going to be pushed out of that spot, who would be the one young guy that you would be your prediction that could get that job done? And younger than Pat.
It would be between Sullivan Absher and Sam Pendleton for me. Those would be the two guys. I would probably defer to Sullivan just because I think that Sullivan has a little bit more upside than Sam. I think Sam's going to start at some point at Notre Dame and be a rock solid player, but I think Sullivan just kind of brings a little bit more upside as far as an athlete. So if there was one that was just able to cut that gap and then really start to take hold potentially of a position into the rest of the offseason, I would go with Sullivan Absher making the move inside, but I would not count out Sam Pendleton as a guy that's kind of a better version of Pat Coogan. He's super steady, really physical, smart dude, but he's just a little bit more talented than Pat Coogan, in my opinion.
A little bit more athletic, a little bit more powerful, a little bit bigger. Yeah, I agree. Similar players, but Sam's just better in all those areas. He's just younger. That's the only thing Pat Coogan has on him right now. He's just 2 years older.
Agreed.
That's it. Hambone 3441 Ryan has a couple. So here's number one. Cam Williams establishes himself in the two deep.
I'm going to buy that one. Yeah, I'm going to buy it because I think that field wide receiver position, the Z, which was formerly the X, but now is considered the Z in the offense, which it always should have been. But that's like literally, if you would have asked me for the last 15 years what the Z position is, I would have been like, it's the outside field position that is off the line of scrimmage a ton and short motions and whatever. Another conversation for another day. But I anticipate Chris Mitchell's the veteran. He'll probably get a lot of reps there, and I expect him to be the starter when we go into the season at the Z position. But I would not be surprised at all because I had kind of been told even before, because everybody knows that Cam Williams got injured a little bit at the All-Star game, but it wasn't a serious injury, obviously. So I don't think he's going to be hampered for the rest of the offseason. I think he's going to be ready to go based upon just kind of what I knew at the time. So as long as he's healthy, I am fully buying that because I think that he is the easiest projection to the Z position outside of Chris Mitchell. His body type, his play style, that's what you want to see at the Z. So I will buy Cam Williams in the two deep by the end of spring.
I'm with you on that, Ryan. I'm going to buy it as well. The only exception could be if there's some player movement. Let's say Jaden Greathouse gets moved out to the Z and somebody else is in the at F position. And then I could see maybe Cam not being there. But I could also see a situation where Cam gets a little bit of boundary work this spring as well, Ryan. That's the other thing, too, is because you don't, Deion's banged up. Jaden Thomas is a move around guy. Micah Gilbert's in his class. He could maybe be that guy. But if they're going to be as interchangeable as I hope they are, because that's something I thought Mike Denbrock did a pretty good job of it at LSU was, Malik Neighbors was not always in the same position. They would move him around. Right.
Yep.
Then I think we could see something along those lines. So that'll be interesting to see. Second one from Hambone 3441. Tyler Buckner plays quarterback at Notre Dame again.
Selling, baby, selling. I think that we're past that at this point, Hambone. I understand why it's a question. He's obviously on campus. He's playing with the lacrosse team. He was obviously a very talented football player, at one point at Notre Dame. But I just think that the whole situation that happened with him leaving, going to Alabama, coming back to be a lacrosse player, like that bridge is just kind of gone at this point, right? Like, I'm not even going to say burnt because I don't think it was necessarily like a bad ending or a bad relationship, like that type of thing. I just think the bridge has disappeared, like it just isn't there anymore. So I'd be very surprised if Tyler Buckner was a part of the football team again. Very surprised.
Ryan, guys don't just quit football and then come back like that again. I mean, there's a reason he's just kind of over playing football and playing lacrosse. Could I see it? Sure, I could see it, but right now I'm with you, Ryan. I'm buying it. I'm selling it. Excuse me, I'm selling it.
Yep.
Poe Welch 84, Ryan says a buy, sell, or hold. A quarterback transfers after the spring game. This is transfers out.
Yeah. Look, man, anytime we're talking about four very talented quarterbacks and we're talking about a potential battle for the backup quarterback position in the spring, because it's going to be a heated battle. I mean, everybody, look, Riley Leonard's going to be the starting quarterback at Notre Dame, but who is going to be that second guy? Right now, it looks like it's Steve, right? Obviously, and Jelly, he has the game experience, but Kenny Minchey in year 2, CJ Carr coming in as an early enrollee. There's going to be a battle as for the backup spot. There's no doubt about it. So if I had to predict, I would buy that take that potentially there is a transfer. I'm not going to necessarily predict it, but if I had to choose one or the other in the world of college football, the way it is today with the transfer portal and so much movement constantly, I would probably lean more buy than sell at this point.
I don't like the answer that we're giving, Ryan, but I agree with you. It's buy. It's just the world we live in. I hope that we're wrong on this one. I do. I'd like to see all four of these kids stay, but I just don't. I'm glad the question wasn't who transfers or so-and-so transfers, because I'm much more comfortable saying, generally speaking, somebody's going to leave after the spring. Yeah. Christopher Crosby, Ryan, here's a good one. This is kind of big picture, but I'm going to allow it for this section of the show because it does kind of, I think if it's the answer is going to start to show itself this spring. So buy, sell, or hold from Christopher Crosby. Charles Jagasaw is the long-term answer at left tackle with so much
buying.
talent.
I'm buying. Yeah. I think that we saw what I needed to see from Charles during his lone starts. There's obviously some growing pains that was anticipated for a player that was literally playing. I know he played sparingly before that, a few snaps, but that was literally his first real game action when we're really talking about that. And obviously his first start. So I saw everything I needed to see. 6'7", 330 pounds, length for days, athleticism. And outside of I don't really know who even challenges as much for the left tackle spot. I mean, I think we're kind of right now it's, Tosh Baker and Emil Wagner are kind of battling for that right tackle spot. I think it's pretty assumed that right now Charles Jagasaw would be the left tackle. I mean, if Gerby Lambert was in here and he was an early enrollee, maybe that's a conversation we could have. But right now, I think it's Charles at left tackle. I think you've jump-started the future. And now with the redshirt rule, literally he played only a couple football games last year. So he's a redshirt freshman that already has a start under his belt at a paramount position. And I think he's the left tackle for the foreseeable future. Yes.
I would also buy that, Ryan, because I think if Gerby was here, I think the battle would be for Gerby to start opposite Charles, not battling to beat Charles out. I think that would be the
Or
conversation.
even maybe giving him a look inside potentially, like somewhere else other than left tackle,
yeah.
right? Yeah, agreed.
So
Yeah.
I'm going to buy that one as well. I actually kind of like the fact that Charles got knocked down, like I think like 2 of the first 3 plays of the game. I actually kind of like that. It was sort of that welcome to college football moment because we're going, okay, how's the big boy going to react? He's never really gone up against somebody that's could knock him down before. You know what I mean? How's he going to react? And I thought it took him about a series and a half, maybe 2 full series to kind of get caught up to speed of game. And after that, he was pretty darn good, man. He really was. For considering it was his first start as a true freshman and all that.
No, I thought he looked really good down the course of the stretch of the game. And I think that's really important because the one thing that can happen with offensive tackles sometimes is when they're young and they're not challenged, sometimes they can get super robotic with everything they do, right? Like I'm staying true to my technique, true to my technique. Sometimes when you get knocked down a couple times or you lose a couple reps early, it allows you to play looser, right? Like, okay, I look, I need to harness my athleticism. When we're talking about like really focusing on the technique aspects of the game, we'll do that every single day at practice and it'll become muscle memory. But at the end of the day, there's a moment and it happens sometimes in the first start for players. Sometimes it never happens. And sometimes it's somewhere in between. There's a point where it's like you get knocked in the mouth and you're like, okay, dude, I got to let loose now, right? Like I got to let loose. I got to harness my athleticism. And I think we saw that with Charles down the course of that game of like, hey, trust your technique, but also you're 6'7", 330 and an incredible athlete. Like utilize those things to your advantage.
And you saw some internal toughness, right? I mean,
Yes.
guys that are physically tough until they get punched in the mouth. And then they're like, I didn't like that very much. I won't do that again. With Charles, it's kind of like, okay, let's see how he handles this. Let's see if he's okay with this. And I thought he kind of relished in it. I thought it brought out the best in him. So it was good to see that. Here's another O-line one. This is from Domer Grizz. Buy, sell, or hold. By the end of the spring, the O-line will be catching more than they did last season.
The O-line will be catching more than they did last season.
This was sort of coming from a negative standpoint. Like he doesn't see growth happening in year 2 under Joe Rudolph.
I would sell that very much. Look, how good it'll be under Coach Rudolph is still up for a heavy debate, right? Like, is it going to be excellent? Is it going to be good? Is it going to be somewhere in between? We don't know to what level, but rarely ever, because Joe Rudolph has a good resume, guys. Like it's not like this guy is a first-year coach where you're just like, he might be a bad coach. I think we can at least say that Joe Rudolph is a good offensive line coach. Is he great? Is he elite? We have no idea, right? But year 1 to year 2, you usually see tremendous growth. And I think the great thing about the offensive line down the stretch is we talked about Charles getting a start, but Ashton Craig had multiple starts during the stretch of the season. Billy Schrouth had multiple starts. Emil Wagner has started some football games. But obviously, Pat Coogan has started a bunch this past season as well. So I think just that maturation, that experience, and then year 2 under Joe Rudolph, I would be surprised if they take a massive step back compared to our expectation, because the expectation based upon last year offensive line is different than this year offensive line because you don't have Joe Alton anymore. You don't have Blake Fisher. There are some new starters, but I would be very surprised if Charles Jagusah wasn't better than he was last season. I'd be very surprised if Pat Coogan wasn't better than he was last season. I'd be very surprised if Billy Schrouth, Ashton Craig, Tosh Baker, Emil Wagner potentially too, fighting for a spot. I'd be surprised if they just weren't better versions of themselves in year 2 under Coach Rudolph.
The premise of the question also got into, Ryan, the notion of like, we've talked about maybe there wasn't as much buy-in as you would hope from that group. And he said he's concerned that we haven't heard any reports about, that being dealt with. And my answer was kind of like, well, everyone that would have been an issue with is not here anymore. So what's the reason of reporting it, right? I mean, you've lost 3 of your 5 starters. You lost another guy that was a veteran that was part of your rotation. And we saw a lot less catching in the last 3 games of the year than we did the first 10 when you had guys that have been primarily coached by Joe Rudolph. So you'd actually have to ask this 5 returning starting offensive linemen plus Rocco to regress from what we saw of them the last time they were on the field together in the spring game in the bowl game, because even though the O-line at times still has that issue of hitting and stopping their feet, they weren't catching. There's a difference. There's a difference between catching, because like what they would do under Jeff Quinn is they would literally step and accept contact. That's not okay. What we saw in the bowl game and late in the year from Ashton Craig and Billy Schrouth, and it needs to be corrected, is they would step, initiate contact, then stop their feet. That's different than catching. That's just okay, this is the next level. When you hit, you've got to work your feet through contact and get to the angles and things like that. That's different than catching. So I have a hard time believing that the guys we saw not catch late in the year are going to all of a sudden start catching, because that wasn't really something that I thought was an issue. There are issues that I've seen from some of Joe Rudolph's O-lines at Wisconsin. That wasn't one of them. And so I'm with you, Ryan. I am selling the heck out of that one. Ape Gambino with a buy, seller, hold, Ryan. The wide receiver portal pickup, so for the spring, that's just Chris Mitchell and Jaden Harrison, are good enough that no freshman receivers will be in the 2-deep after spring ball. Kind of an answer from earlier, kind of answers this, but let's go with that one.
No, I think that we're going to have at least one in the 2-deep, and I think that it's probably Cam Williams the most likely. But it has nothing to do with Chris Mitchell and Jaden Harrison necessarily. It's more about you're kind of remaking a room a little bit. Like, yes, you might have Jordan Faison coming back. You might have Jaden Greathouse coming back. You might have Jaden Thomas and Deion Colsey, but you still lost Braylon James, Enrico Flores, and Tobias Merriweather. That attrition is going to leave opportunity up for Notre Dame receivers coming in. And obviously included in that, on top of the 2 enrollees from transfers, you still have some very talented younger wide receivers, freshmen that are going to come in that are going to have to establish some playing time, and you're going to have to fight for playing time. So I would say that I believe that I am selling this take because I do think that there is going to be a freshman wide receiver in the 2-deep by the end of spring, but I'm not selling it for the reasons that you think I'm selling it, right? I'm selling it because I just think it's attrition in the room. I think that Chris Mitchell will probably be the starting outside receiver. I think Jaden Harrison will get some play in the slot and obviously as a returner, but I still think that Cam Williams is going to play, and is going to establish a role. I think Micah Gilbert could fight for playing time, obviously, as well. So I do think I would sell the take off of the nature of no freshman receiver is going to be in the 2-deep, but it's not for the reasons that I think most people would think. I hope that makes sense.
It makes total sense. Yeah, it's not that you don't have faith in the portal guys. It's just, number one, the portal guys, only one of them's playing that position. Jaden Harrison's a slot.
Right.
Bo Collins is going to be a boundary, and Bo won't even be here in the spring. Bo's not going to show up until the summer. So I agree with you. If he's not in the 2-deep, it'll be more about the sophomores, to your point, and what I discussed earlier, than it will be because of the portals, the guys, right? That
kind of off topic, but I'm actually very interested to see what Jaden Harrison's able to do for Notre Dame as a wide receiver, because I think we just kind of have an assumption that he's just going to be a great returner, which I think he will be. But I was watching some of the Marshall's running back Rasheen Ali recently, Brian, and Jaden Harrison's a better receiver than I thought he was, man. I wasn't anticipating what to expect out of him. I think he's pretty talented as a wide receiver. So I'm kind of interested to see if I'm not saying he'll come in and start for Notre Dame, but like he was a lot better than I thought he was going to be. I thought Marshall was just as awful at quarterback, like terrible.
But could he be good enough, along with KK Smith and Jordan Faison, to say, we're going to get Jaden outside? Now, if Jaden's outside, Jaden Greathouse is outside with Chris Mitchell, now there is a chance that Cam may not be in the 2-deep right away and is more of a niche player, a 10 to 15 snap big play guy, but he's not the part of the normal rotation. So again, I think that has more to do with the sophomore class than it does anything else at that point in time. Because if Jaden Harrison beats out Jaden Greathouse, but Jaden Greathouse isn't better than Cam Williams, then Cam will be in the 2-deep. And so I could see that. I could see Cam not being in the 2-deep, because we're talking about the end of spring, because the sophomore class is the ones that hold him back. That would be more plausible for me. Good stuff. Very good stuff. So here's one from DMND13. By the Blue Gold game, the wide receivers will already look noticeably better from a technique standpoint than they did at the end of the 2023 regular season.
Oh, yeah, I'm buying that. I'm buying that for sure. I think that, hey, there's just going to be natural things of progression, just based upon working with a coach for X amount of practices, but more importantly, kind of understanding the expectation all off season, even into this. It's not even just a spring practice centric thing. I think this is just kind of the whole standard, right? So I am buying that tremendously. I thought that it was pretty awesome to see how much growth you saw just based upon the bowl prep with Mike Brown. So I think giving him a whole offseason and a whole spring practice session to work with those guys. And that also counts. Chris Mitchell's coming in as a 6-year guy, right? Like he's been working, right? Like he's been working. Jane Harrison's been working. You got a couple older guys that you're bringing into the room, and I think Jaden Greathouse is going to be better from a technical perspective in year 2. I think Jane Thomas is going to be better working with Mike Brown. I think that Deion Colsey, if he's able to participate, at a full scale, is going to be better. I think that working with Mike Brown is going to make them a whole lot better in a short amount of time. Yes, I do. Buying.
I would buy it even if Chancey Stuckey was still the receivers coach, because there's just going to be a natural
year.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's not just the end of the year, Ryan. That's for the returners. But again, Chris Mitchell is going to be better than what they had last year because of what he was already taught by somebody else. Same with Jaden Harrison, same with Bo Collins, that type of thing. But when you include Mike Brown into the conversation, I think it's going to be significantly better. And to Dan's question, he did say noticeably better. I kind of take that meaning like it's like, wow, holy moly, this is a lot better. And I think the addition of Mike Brown makes it that. So it's already going to be better anyway. This is going to make it a big jump in my view.
I mean, I would ask, even for people that are in the chat, like, wasn't it noticeably better just based upon the several practices that they had before the bowl game? Like, it was so much better just in that small amount of time. So I find it hard to believe that it won't be significantly better based upon a partial off season with spring practice.
Right.
Like I would be surprised if it wasn't a lot better.
Well, and as a receivers coach, you give me 14 practices. If I'm any good at all, guys that aren't very good route runners are going to look like a lot better route runners unless I'm just not good at my job.
Sure.
So here's another good one.
Added in at the end of spring as well. So you're giving all that practice time, obviously.
Yes.
Yep.
DMND13, we will have a buy, sell, or hold. We will have a very good idea of the starting 5 on the offensive line by the end of the spring.
I buy that. Yeah, I buy that. I think there's going to be competition throughout the rest of the offseason, obviously, and then into the fall. But I expect Charles Jagasaw to start. I expect Ashton Craig to start. I expect Billy Schrout to start. There's going to be a battle at the right tackle spot. There's going to be a battle at the other guard spot, ideally, I hope. Right? But either way, we'll have a good idea mostly of the starting 5. Yeah, I think 3 out of 5, you'll have a pretty good idea. And I consider that mostly. It's above 50%, right? So 3 out of 5, I will buy it just based upon having a good idea that at least 3 out of 5 will be starters on day 1.
I'm going to sell, although I agree with your premise, but I'm still taking that as a sell because he says we'll have a very good idea of the starting 5. I do think that we're going to have at least one. My prediction is that there's going to be a battle at right tackle. Not that Tosh isn't going to play well, but that either Emil or Sullivan is going to be good enough to where we're like, this is going to carry into the fall. And I think one of the guard positions that's going to happen at as well. I think we're going to have at least one, maybe 2, to where we're going to say, hey, I'm not sure who the starter is going to be there. And so to me, I don't know who the starting 5 is going to be. So we're kind of on the same page on what we expect, Ryan. I just view that as a sell. You view that as a buy.
It's fair. Yeah.
Here's some more O-line ones, Ryan. This is a good one. John A1, buy, sell, or hold. Joe Otting will challenge Ashton Craig at center in the battle that will flow into fall camp.
I'm selling it. I'm going to sell that one. I think that Joe's future is very bright at Notre Dame, and I think that he is probably going to be considered, and I would consider him the next guy after Ashton Craig, because everyone knows, if you followed his recruitment, I'm very high on Joe Otting, the talents, and it was always just about, could he gain the necessary weight? Well, his weight's already getting up there. He's adding a good amount of weight to his frame, which is great to see. But I think that Ashton Craig showed himself the last 3 or so games of the season that he has a lot of upside that he brings to the table. And, due to his play, it was part of the reason that Zeke Correll left, who was a 5th-year senior, right? And that type of situation. So I think that this is Ashton Craig's job to lose this offseason. I believe that he will be the starting center in 2024. I think that Joe can have great growth in this offseason and continue to grow and to continue to get bigger and stronger and more confident. And all those things could be very true, but also know the fact of like, hey, it's still Ashton's job, most likely to lose here. So I'm gonna sell that one.
The way the question was worded, I'm absolutely selling it because I have a lot of faith in Ashton Craig. However, I will say this. if Joe Otting is pushing for a starting job, it won't be pushing Ashton Craig out. It'll be a lot like what happened with Zeke Correll 2 years ago. It's more about Joe outplays one of the two guards, and so they decide to move Ashton to one of the two guard spots or Joe to one of the two guard spots. I think that's more likely than Ashton not starting. That's the thing about this, Ryan, is it's not always this guy is battling for this job, this guy's – so, like, if – let's just say, you know, they decide to put Sam Pendleton behind Billy Schrouth in spring. Billy plays really well. Sam plays really well. And you're like, those are our two best guards. It's not like, well, guess our second best guard is going to have to stay as a backup to the other guy. No, you move one of those guys to left guard. Same thing here. And this is what happened 2 years ago when Jarrett Patterson was out for the spring. Zeke had such a great spring that it was kind of like Zeke's not better than Jarrett, but he's better than the guys that would be playing guard. So we're going to move Jarrett to guard and let Zeke stay at center. I think that would be more likely than him actually pushing Ashton out of the lineup. I think it'd be more about maybe he pushes Pat Coogan out of the lineup or somebody else out of the lineup, that Ashton then slides into that person's role. Because Ashton could easily play guard at Notre Dame, Ryan, easily. Yeah. But maybe it's Joe that moves over to guard. Exactly. Yeah. So I think that would be more likely. Here's another.
A lot of athleticism if that ever happened. Yeah. That would be a lot of athleticism on the interior. So
I also still feel Joe's another year away, physical development wise, from really pushing for that job too. I think if we're going to have this conversation, if you ask this buy, sell, or hold again next year, I think my answer might be more in line with what we just talked about. But right now, I still don't see him pushing this spring. If he does, I'm going to be really fired up because that means he hits a year sooner than we expected. To be honest with you, right? Because I kind of saw Joe as a 2-year developmental guy, just his body coming out. I mean, he's still only listed like 288. Yeah, and he's still only listed to 288. So
I was excited to see him already gain like 20 pounds from when he first
and still moves.
in Notre Dame. So
he still moves. Here's another one from John A1, Ryan. Buy, sell, or hold. Deion Colzie will dominate in the boundary position unchallenged all spring.
Selling for multiple reasons. One, I don't think that it's going. Look, I think that Deion could still be a valuable member of the receiver rotation, but I'm selling just because I have to see it, man. Like at some point, I gotta see it, brother. Like John, I'm sorry, man. Like I gotta see it. And then two, unchallenged. Like I just wouldn't go that far either. I think that there's going to be other options that are at least going to be competitive into the boundary to potentially throw out there. So I would love it if all of a sudden everything finally clicked for Deion Colzie and you're like, dang, that's 6'5", 209 pound wide receiver who could run 4.4 high, more than likely, is a dude all of a sudden. It would be great. But based upon track record and just where we are fundamentally in his career, I am going to sell it for a couple different reasons there.
The language that John added at the end makes this a hard sell for me. Even if I have full confidence in, if I'm like, you know what, he doesn't need to show me anything and he's going to dominate in the boundary, it's still not going to be unchallenged because you're going to have Jaden Thomas there.
Right.
And Jaden Thomas is going to play.
Exactly.
So even if Bo is the number one, I mean, even if Deion's the number one guy, he's still not going to be unchallenged because Jaden's going to challenge him. If you just even forget the whole show me aspect of it, Ryan, which I'm 100% on board with you. Everybody knows I'm about as big of a Deion Colzie fan as you're going to find from a talent potential standpoint. I mean, I think the kid could be a stud at Notre Dame. But we're now talking about a kid that's a junior in college going into a senior year who has 16 career catches, right? I'm with him where I was with Miles Boykin, right? I mean, with Miles Boykin, it was, he's got the talent, but he's got to show me something. That was nice he did it against LSU, just like with Deion, it's nice that he had a really good game against Navy, and it's nice he had a really good game against USC 2 years ago, but like he's got to prove to me he can stay healthy, much less be a dominant player. So if it ends up being to where John's buy sell hold comes to fruition, neither of us are going to be surprised at all because Deion's got at least I shouldn't speak for you, Ron. I'm sorry. I won't be surprised at all. I know you've spoken highly of Deion as well. I don't know if you'll be as unsurprised as I am, but it's at the point now where it's got to be proven that he can A, stay healthy, and B, just consistently go out there enough on a day-to-day basis and be the best version of himself. That's something Deion hasn't proven yet. And so until he does, I got to sell. But at
Yep.
the same time, like I said, I won't be shocked if he does do it. I mean, he's got more God-given ability as a receiver to me than Miles Boykin had, in my opinion. He's more natural athlete than Miles was. Miles is more explosive from a testing standpoint, but you know this, Ryan. You watch Miles play. Some routes, Miles looked like he ran a 4.43, and other routes, it looked like he ran a 4.8. I mean, it would kind of vary a little bit. I think Deion's got all the talent in the world, but he's got to show it.
Mm-hmm.
And until he shows it, I'm in wait and see mode. But the talent's there. But it won't be unchallenged anyway. Even if the light goes completely on, it won't be unchallenged. When you got Jaden Thomas and Micah Gilbert there, it won't be unchallenged.
Well, I was going to say when Jaden Thomas has been healthy, I know he's not the most, the easiest translation to a boundary receiver, but when Jaden Thomas has been healthy, he's been pretty good, man. Like he hasn't been a bad receiver at all. It's like that's the handedly thing, I think, is what really threw me off. It's like, Jaden Thomas is a good player. I have high opinion of Micah Gilbert. So it's just, I think that even if he dominates, it's still not going to be where it's like no competition at all. It's still going to be a competition for sure.
Irish Catholic, buy, sell, or hold. Riley Leonard. I'm surprised it took this long to get to a Riley Leonard question. Very surprised, but he has a good one. Riley, and I like the way some of these got phrased, Ryan. They weren't just like Riley Leonard's going to be really good. This was a really good way of putting it. Riley Leonard shows up on ESPN's way too early Heisman watch list at the end of the spring.
Even if he doesn't play well, he's going to be in that conversation, right? Because he's a dynamic talent who's now going to be the starting quarterback at the University of Notre Dame. I mean, so yeah, I don't even think Riley Leonard has to play well in the spring to be in that way too early list. Because we've seen those lists, man, where you're just like that, like it's a deep list.
How's that guy on that list?
Right. Well, and then also it's like 15 names, 20 names.
Right.
You're like, all right, I guess a lot of people are for the Heisman this year, right? So yeah, Riley Leonard, I would be surprised if he's not on one of those way too early Heisman lists, even if he doesn't play well in the spring. I'd be surprised.
I think that I'm going to sell your buy because he said ESPN's way too early list. And I could see ESPN kind of pulling some shenanigans if Riley doesn't have a good spring. How about that? The betting lists agree completely. I'm going to buy it though, Ryan, because we both are going to buy it. I'm going to buy it because I just think Riley Leonard's going to really play well. And I think he's going to make plays, and we're going to get enough spring access to where there's going to be some storylines about how Riley looks this spring. And then if he plays in the blue gold game, because here's the other thing too, is this assumes he plays in the blue gold game. And if he does, I think he's going to light it up. I can see Riley not playing a lot in the blue gold game and them really trying to get a lot of reps to Steve and Kenny and CJ.
I wouldn't play him a lot. I wouldn't play him a lot.
I play him first half. That's it. And that's it. So that's a good one, Irish Catholic. Ryan S7. Kenny Minchie, buy, sell, or hold. Kenny Minchie is the quote-unquote hyped guy following the blue gold game, meaning he's the guy that people are going to be talking coming out of the spring game.
I mean, I could buy it. I feel like kind of indifferent about it, though. I mean, because could that happen? Yeah, for sure. Could it not happen? Yeah, for sure. So I guess maybe this is a hold in this one, but I could definitely buy it. Actually, no, I wouldn't even be a hold. Yeah, I could buy it. He definitely could be that guy because I think that we tend to, in those games, a lot of times kind of gravitate towards like the flashes, right? Where you're like, oh, snap, who is that guy? And I think Kenny is arguably your most talented thrower in that room, right? Where you could watch him and just be like, you could lose your mind over what he's been able to do on the football field. So I'll buy it. It's definitely an opportunity that Kenny Minchie could be a storyline coming out of the spring game. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to sell it, but not because I disagree with anything you just said. You know how high I'm on Kenny Minchie. To me, the quote unquote, the air quotes hyped guy is why I'm selling, because you and I both know that when it comes to social media, it's not always the guy that necessarily plays the best or throws the prettiest ball that is the guy getting the most hype. In this case, I think that the hype guy, if CJ Carr does anything in the spring game, he'll be that guy. Even if Kenny outplays him, it'll be that. So, but I also think CJ is going to play really well also.
Yeah.
So this isn't me saying CJ's going to be better than Kenny. CJ is going to beat out Kenny and Steve. This is about hype. The question was about hype. And if CJ Carr does anything this spring, he will get the hype. Right or wrong, he will get the hype. So that's why I'm going to sell that one. I'm going to say CJ Carr is that guy. Here's one I know you're going to love, Ryan. Ryan S7, because first of all, because it's from a guy named Ryan, so obviously that's a plus. But it's also about a guy that I know you're very high on. So Ryan S7, buy, sell, or hold. Jeremiah Love has a play over 30 yards in the blue gold game.
Oh, buy. Absolutely buy. Yeah, because I think that we're not going to see everything in a blue gold game, right? As far as what the wrinkles are going to look like in the season, different packages, different formations. Like we're not going to see everything, but I think what we are going to see is that Jeremiah Love can be a asset in the run and pass game. So whether it's a zone heavy run where he's able to break one, or it's a screen, or it's something with him out of the backfield, I think we're going to see enough of him in different capacities that gives a lot of big opportunities to potentially make a big play in that type of scenario. So buy. I'm all in on the Jeremiah Love hype this offseason, man. I'm all in.
I'm all in as well. I'm also all in on the Jadarian Price one. Didn't ask about Jadarian, only asked about Jeremiah Love. I'll be surprised if we don't see Jeremiah rip off a big play or two in the spring game. Yes, 100% agree with you on that one. So I am buying it as well. Here's one from Stephen B. It's a quarterback question, Ryan. Buy, sell, or hold. Steve Angeli holding off Kenny Minchie and CJ Carr by the end of spring.
I'll buy it for the end of spring. I think that what you're really going to see is whether one of those, whether Minchie or Carr can cut the gap going into the rest of offseason, because that's where you will see potentially there being a new number 2 quarterback going into the fall or during fall practice. So I will buy that Steve Angeli is the starting second string quarterback by the end of spring practice.
Agree. I'm buying it too, Ryan. I think those two guys would have to play so much better than Steve to have beat him out by the end of the 15 practices. And I right. Look, you and I both are not super high on Steve Angeli in relation to him being a future starter at Notre Dame to win a championship. But Steve Angeli's not a bum. He also is more experienced. He started a game and won a bowl game. Those guys would have to be so much better than him to beat him out that early. I think you nailed it perfectly, Ryan. The question is not whether or not Steve will be 2 by the end of spring. The question is, as you said, will they close the gap enough to where the summer and then the 25 practices leading into the first game, can one of those guys beat him out by then? I think that's the bigger question. Right. So I'm with you. I'm buying that one. Here's the last fan question or member question for the offense, and then we have 2 of our questions. This one is from Nathan Milton. Buy, sell, or hold Micah Bell changing positions to wide receiver.
I saw this one. I'm selling it, Nathan. I think that Micah Bell is going to compete to being the starting. I think he's going to compete for reps in the slot in 2024. I don't see any reason with the transfer portal pickups that you've had this offseason, with bringing in 3 wide receivers, 2 of which that will be in the spring, and Micah Gilbert and Cam Williams. I don't see the need to make that move, especially because Micah Bell would be a slot in Notre Dame system. And right now, Notre Dame has a lot of slot options. They got a lot of slot options on the
receiver.
Yeah. So yeah. I will sell that. There's no reason to move Micah Bell to offense. No reason.
I love how the person that asked
he sold his own take.
I love it.
Come on, man. You can't sell your own take.
I'm selling also, Ryan, for the reasons you mentioned. Here's where it could have happened. Okay. So, you bring in Jordan Clark, you've got Clarence Lewis that can play that position. You've got Christian Gray and Jaden Mickey, to where if you were hurting at receiver, you don't get Jaden Harrison, you don't get Chris Mitchell, you don't, you're short on numbers. You don't have those bodies there. Then you know what? This is a dynamic athlete. We got to move him over there. Or if it was, well, we're okay at receiver, but we're also short at running back. So this guy's a guy that gives us some jet options and things like that. Yeah, but they're loaded at both positions. Running back more, and receiver both, of guys can make plays in ways that you would need Micah to make plays. And doubling down on what you said, he's also the future at nickel from everything I've been told this offseason. And so I'm not wasting that opportunity.
He's also his offensive background was at running back, not at receiver as well. So not only would you be moving him from defense to offense, you also be putting him on an offensive position that he didn't really play at high school. When he came out of Texas, literally he was a running back, full on inside zone, running back. He wasn't really a slot in high school at all. So you also be teaching him a brand new position that he has no idea how to play, really.
So here's the two staff buy, sell, holds that we kind of discussed before. Number one, buy, sell, or hold. Yep. The transition into the Mike Denbrock offense across the board will be a smooth one during the spring.
I'm buying it because it's the entirety of spring. I think that we'll see a lot of growth into it. If you ask me maybe the first 5 or 6 practices, I would probably sell it because there's a transitional period that's going to happen. But by the end of the full practices, I will say that it was a smooth transition in the sense of they are now comfortable with what the expectation are, what the offense is trying to accomplish, and all the things behind it. So the entirety of the spring, I will buy. If it was a little bit of a segment of spring, I might sell it in that case.
Right. If the transition was by practice 1, they will have it all figured out. I'm a buy as well, Ryan. I'm a hard buy because what you mentioned, this is not a super complicated offense that takes a million years to learn, and it's just so dramatically different than what they were before. They're not. That's part one. And part two, I think the things Mike Denbrock does fit perfectly with the specific strengths of the current roster. I think that helps as well. I think the receivers are going to fit in well to the things he wants to do. I think the O-line is where the O-line and quarterback are where the two biggest question marks would be in general, in theory. And I think Riley, I was talking about this on a show. I was interviewed by the CFP Nation guys today, and we're talking about Riley Leonard. And I said, I thought Riley Leonard fit into what we thought Jared Parker wanted to do offensively, but we know he fits in with what Mike Denbrock has done for the last decade. Mike Denbrock has had 3 different quarterbacks go 10 plus touchdowns in a season during his year from rushing. Riley fits even better now into the Notre Dame offense than he did when he first committed to the Notre Dame offense. So quarterback, I think, will be a smooth transition. I think offensive line, heavy inside zone, outside zone, counter team, that fits in very well with what Notre Dame does from a strength standpoint this past year. I mean, that's when they were at their best, in my opinion, was when they stuck to that type of stuff. And so I think that's another reason why the transition will be smooth. So, yes, by the second half of fall camp or spring practice, we're going to be feeling very good about the ability to translate into this offense. This is a little bit tougher one, Ryan. Buy, sell, or hold. By the end of spring, we will be talking about the wide receiver position being a strength of the Notre Dame football team heading into the fall. It's a little tough.
I'm going to use my lone hold on this one because I think that do I think that the wide receiver position is going to be better by the end of spring? Yes. Do I think that we'll start to be feeling optimistic about it? Yes. But when you say a position of strength, I think that that's now, you're comparing to some other spots that maybe you feel better about right now today than what you do about wide receivers. So I'll hold on that one just based upon the entirety of the question and not just a section of the question.
I think the answers in the chat and the fact that you're a hold on that speaks a lot to what you're talking about, Ryan. I literally saw someone buy. First, the responses to that question: buy, sell, hold. Those are the first 3 answers because I think you hit it correctly. This is why I asked that question. It's, well, number one, how will we know? Like, based on what? And number 2, a strength relative to what? Are we going to feel a lot better about that than we do the O-line, the quarterback position? Or is it just hey, those are strengths too, but this is also a strength. So there's a lot of varying degrees. I'm actually going to buy it, though, because it was my question. So obviously I'm feeling good about it. And it's because the one interesting thing, the most proven position that Notre Dame has from a career production standpoint on offense is the wide receivers. Like, you've got over 5,000 career yards of offense because we haven't seen it in a Notre Dame uniform, but we've seen Deion Colzie in the past. We've seen Jaden Thomas, but we've seen what Chris Mitchell can do. We've seen, like you said, what Jaden Harrison can do. And then, of course, what the young guys did late in the season. So I'm actually going to buy it. I think we're going to be very excited about the receiving core coming into at the end of spring. But your hold makes a lot of sense, right? It makes a lot of sense. We're going to move over to the defense next, folks. But before we do us a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification button. You guys can see all of it right here. Share this podcast. And if you've not done so, today's show is another example of why you need to be a member of the board. And Ryan, I know you're going to have an intel piece on Ivan Taylor coming up later today. Did you already put it up? Already on there.
It's already on there.
It's already on there, guys. So if you're unsure of where things stand with Ivan Taylor, with Chris O'Leary leaving, Ryan has an intel piece. Got very good sourcing on that. We've both been able to kind of confirm that this what Ryan is reporting is what we believe to be the accurate reflection of the situation. So we have that in there, and then he and I are still working on a bigger intel piece that will probably drop either tonight or tomorrow. So you're going to be around for that. But that is members board only stuff, which you can find at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Let's transition into the buy, seller, hold for the Notre Dame defense, Ryan. And we're going to kick things off with Hambone 3441, buy, seller, hold. Jalen Sneed is running as a starter with the first team defense with no specific time frame given, which I think kind of makes it an interesting question.
I will say that Jalen Sneed will be running with the ones at some point this spring. Yes. I'm not necessarily ready to buy him to being the de facto number one heading into the season. I think there's a competition that's going to happen. It's also a lot of variables that matter in this one too, right? It's like, Jack Kaiser potentially moving into Will full time. That opens up the Rover spot, obviously. Does he stay outside at Rover and you have a real battle in at Will with Jalen Sneed and Jane Osbury? Like there's a lot of factors that are part of this, but I also think it's pretty safe for me to buy this one in the sense of, do I think Jalen Sneed is going to be running with the ones during the spring at some points? Yes, absolutely do. I would be surprised if he wasn't. So I will say buy on that one.
I'm a buy,
but it's fine.
Well, no, it's I mean, because again, that there was no time frame. It wasn't the entire spring. By the end of spring, it just said Jalen Sneed is running as a starter with the first team defense. I think that it's going to happen early on. I think Jalen Sneed will start the spring as a first team guy. Then the question is can you hold on to it? The reason I think that, it's very simple, that he was a starter in the bowl game. I mean, he moved out to Rover. You had Jack Kaiser starting a Will. You had J.D. Bertrand at Mike. We don't anticipate either one of those guys moving to Mike right now. We think that's going to be Drake Bowen, maybe a Jaden Alsbury, Preston Zinner, Kingston Williamasa. So, yes, I do think at some point in time Jalen Sneed will start as the ones. And I won't be surprised if he holds on to it for a while. I think what it ended up being, Ryan, is by the end of spring, someone is kind of pushing him, and it's let's see what happens in the fall. If he gets beat out in the spring, that's going to be disappointing, I think, because he should have the advantage over some of those guys. He's now going into year 3 of the system. This is going to be his third spring. He should have an advantage over some of those other guys. But I do think at some point in time, just from the simple fact that he ended the season in the starting lineup, I think is why I'm going to go with that one. And again, we're talking about when they're in their base defense, not, I mean, in their base, their 4-3 personnel defense is what I'm going to say. Poe Welch with a question, Ryan. This is a good one. Buy, sell, or hold. A freshman defensive player is the leader for a starting job after the Blue Gold game.
Selling that one. Yeah. I because I'm trying to think of like where you would even look at that spot, right? I mean, because secondary wise, Xavier Watts, you're going to have a couple of the sophomores that are going to be in that conversation, right?
And there's only one of the 3 freshmen that are going to even be on campus at safety, right?
Exactly. Yep. So unless Kennedy Urlacher just blows everyone's socks off, I think it's safe to assume that he will not be at safety. Cornerback, you have Benjamin Morrison, and then you have the junior-sophomore tandem of Christian Gray and Jaden Mickey fighting for the other spot. And on the defensive line, the only guy that I think is even somewhat reasonable, I guess, is Bryce Young. But I don't think Bryce Young is going to be the de facto starter after the spring. Like maybe he pushes at some point in the fall to be the starting big end, and maybe you move an RJ Oben at that point at some point. But I think that you will see RJ Oben, you will see Joshua Burnham at big end a lot in the spring. You're going to see Jordan Botelho. You're going to see the interior defensive lineman. So I would sell just off the simple fact of like, I don't think there's like a easy spot that's like, yeah, that's wide open, man. Like there's a lot of good players coming back on defense this year for Notre Dame. So I will sell that one, and probably sell that one about as heavy of a sell as I've done so far in this show, to be honest.
Follow-up buy, sell, or hold, Ryan, from PA Irish Guy 23. Kingston Viliama-Asa pushes for the starting Mike spot.
He can. I mean, he can, but there's talented older players that are there as well. Do I think that Kingston Viliama-Asa is going to play in the season, this upcoming season, at inside linebacker for Notre Dame? Yes, I do. But to the question of, Is he going to be the starter coming, or have the inside track to be a starter after the spring? No, I think you're still going to have Drake Bowen that's going to be able to participate in spring. You're still going to have Jaden Osbury. You're still going to have Preston Zinter. You're still going to have some dudes that have been on the roster longer, right? So I think it's more about, can Kingston close the gap so much that going into the rest of the offseason, it's like he's the de facto number 2 at Mike, no questions, and then maybe takes over at some point in the fall because he's just too good to keep off the field. That's more realistic in my opinion.
Because you've predicted that you think he's going to start at some point in time as a freshman. That's different than saying he'll have that job by the end of the spring. I will say this: I'm going to buy that one because the I hope it's true. And here's what I mean by that. The question, or the buy sell hold from PA Irish Guy 23 was KVA Kingston Viliamu pushes for the starting mic job. I hope that's true, because if he pushes for it and doesn't get it, it means what we believe about Drake Bowen and Jaden Osbury is accurate. Because if Kingston plays well enough to push, but he doesn't get it, it means the light went on for Drake Bowen. For me,
right?
That's where I'm going with it. And now, if you were to tell me Kingston is starting at Mike linebacker in the spring, I'm a hard sell, and I'm kind of with you. And going back to the previous question, because what you have to understand is we like a lot of players on this incoming freshman class. But some of the guys we like a lot are guys that were not necessarily year one guys. Logan Thomas is not a year one guy. Leonard Moore won't even be here this spring. Bronte Johnson won't even be here this spring. Carson Hobbs won't be here this spring. Bryce Young is a guy that has the talent to do so, but you got to beat out RJ Oben and Josh Burnham, who you and I both graded out as a top 100 player coming into Notre Dame 2 years ago, and is a very talented player.
And I think Bryce Young will play as a freshman, and I think that he will play a ton of football, but I wouldn't necessarily predict him to be a starter year one. I would say that he's going to be a key rotational player at big ends at some point in the season.
I'm going to kind of try to stay with some of these conversations, Ryan, that take advantage of that, because I think there was another one that played into this, that some of these conversations. Well, here's one from Zibby's Boxing Gloves. Drake Bowen solidifies himself as a starting linebacker despite playing baseball.
I think that we will leave the spring and Drake Bowen will be the projected starting Mike on the next level. He said cemented in that. Did he say cement himself as the starting Mike?
Yeah, Drake Bowen solidifies, which is the same thing. It's the same thing.
Right. I won't say solidified, because I still think that Drake's going to have to battle the rest of the offseason and into the fall to be the starting Mike. But I do think that Drake Bowen will be the starting Mike leaving spring practice. But so technically I am selling it just because I don't think that it's going to be like a, he's solidified. It's a no-brainer. It's one, then tier break, then number 2. Like, I do think that there's going to be a battle that's going to ensue after spring for that spot.
I think some people might be able to perceive our responses here as a little schizophrenic. Hold on a second. You're not saying the freshmen are going to start, but you're also saying that Drake Bowen's not going to solidify himself. Exactly. That's a great place to be, because
talent thing.
Exactly. Does Ryan and I think the world of Kingston? Yeah. I think you graded him as a 5-star. I graded him as a borderline 5-star. And yet we're sitting there saying, like, he's probably not going to be coming out of the spring as a starter. It's not that long ago, Ryan, he would have easily done that. The reason why we're saying no is because there's this Drake Bowen dude, and there's this Jaden Osbury dude, this Preston Zinter dude, that are really good football players as well. Then the flip side is, well, they're not just going to lock it down with no question because Kingston's that good. That's a good place to be. And it goes back to what I said earlier. If I'm gonna sell that, I absolutely believe Drake Bowen is going to be Notre Dame starting Mike linebacker this year. But the reason I believe that is because I think this is the first time Drake is ever going to truly be pushed from behind. I think everything that up to this point in Drake's career has been being pushed by internal push. I want to be great. I want to be really good. Last year was pushing. It was chasing. I need to learn from JD. I need to learn from this guy. Now that Drake's that guy, this is the first time he's ever been on a football field where there's a guy behind him that's like, that guy's my equal in certain areas. Knowing Drake like we do, I think that's why I'm so excited about what he's going to do, because I think Drake is going to thrive in that reality, just like I think Kingston is going to thrive in that reality. So I
Yeah.
don't think Drake's just going to be way ahead of Kingston, and I don't think Kingston's going to pass Drake up, because these are studs. And you don't
Yep.
usually see that separation with studs when they're only a year apart. And I'll say
Right.
this, it would not shock me if at some point in time in the next couple years we're seeing Drake and Kingston on the field together.
I
Would not
think
shock
it
me
could
at all.
happen some in 2024. I think it could
That's
happen
right.
some in 2024. We'll see though.
So it's an exciting place to be. There was a question from
Yes.
DMND13 that I was going to bring up during the team one, Ryan, but I think it's kind of appropriate to the discussion we're having now. So
Okay.
this can be more than just defense, but I think the defense is going to be where I want to spend the time because of where we are. DMND13 had a buy-seller hold. There will be at least 4 early enrollees who already look like they are too good to keep off the field in the fall.
Oh yeah, I mean if we're extending it to, the full team, then absolutely buying that one, but I will if we're just keeping it to
No,
defense,
we can
or
we can
we can
talk
go full
about
thing.
the defense, but it's
Yeah.
a whole thing,
Oh,
because there's just
if
not
it's
enough defensive
yeah,
players in that position, in my opinion.
if there is, yeah, if we're extending it to the full team for Dan's question, then it is a buy for me because we've talked about Kingston already. We've talked about Bryce Young. I do think that both those guys are going to play as true freshmen because it's just going to be like, come on, guys, like, what are we doing? Cam Williams is another, just too talented. And I think one of Keedron Young or Aeneas Williams, you're going to be like, brother, like, I get we're good at running back, but like, those guys are pretty good, man. Like, they're really good. So that does not even counting if Micah Gilbert can fight for a spot at some
Right.
point. Like, there's a lot of talent there. Maybe Gerby Lambert at some point. You're just like, all right,
And
Gerby's
if we're
got to play
talking
it
spring,
right. Yeah.
Raymond Harton just had one, Sean. Or I mean, Ryan, and it's about
Yep.
Sean Sevillano.
Sevillano.
That's
Yep.
another
Good.
one because, like,
Yeah.
to me, do I think he's going to crack the 2 deep? Probably not. That's not my prediction right now. Do I
Yep.
think, do I think there's a chance that they say, hey, how do we not have this kid as part of our goal line package or our short yardage
Yes.
package? I can see
Sure.
something like that.
I could say
You
the
just
same.
have
Yeah.
to make that decision. Is this a 5-year guy or not? And
Yep.
that's the question you have to ask yourself. But I could easily see a kid like that with his athleticism plus size combination of saying, hey, we get in the goal line next year. Next time we're in a 1 yard to go situation against Ohio State, we're going to make sure that 330-pound kid's out on the field.
And if we extend to special teams, Joseph Vinci at long snapper, maybe potentially at
Well,
some point this season. Like, who
and
knows?
he's an
Who
early
knows?
enrollee. And I'll give you another one,
He is.
Ryan. I kind of thought it was
Yep.
funny. You're like, and look, I'm as high on Kennedy Urlacher as anyone on the planet, but barring injury, I don't see him being too deep at safety this spring. But here's what I'll tell
Yep.
you. I think that Marty Biaggi is going to be petitioning Mike Mickens and Al Golden and Marcus Freeman from like day one to not redshirt Kennedy Urlacher. For
Sure.
same
Yep.
reason you had Luke Talich running down on scout on.
Oh,
I mean, Luke
there's
Talich was a starter on special teams last year. Drake Bowen was a starter on special teams last year. I think Kennedy
yeah.
Urlacher is going to be the guy. Kennedy, and I think that he's going to have a conversation, but I think he's going to lose this one for Bodie Cahoon. That's the other guy I think he's
Yeah.
going to fight for, but I think he's going to lose that one because I think it's going to make way too much sense to redshirt Bodie. But he's another one.
Yes.
But I think you could lose that battle with Kennedy because, again, if you're a safety and you're a 5-year guy, you're probably not that good. Unless you're in a unique situation like a Xavier Watts where you spent half your career playing offense, that kind of thing. But a guy that comes in right away. So if you're going to go special teams, he's another guy that I think is just going to be too good to not be on the field in that role. Run real fast and hit people. That's the one thing that we all agree we know Kennedy can do. It's run real fast and hit people, right?
Yep.
So I could see him being that guy as well. So I like that one, right? All right, let's get back to pure defense here. Tommy Rock with a buy-seller hold. Josh Burnham is pushing for the starting Viper position this spring.
No, selling that one. We know that he's going to be playing a lot of big end, obviously, this offseason. I think that's you need him at that spot, especially for depth, especially as Bryce Young is getting acclimated and being able to make sure that he can even play a decent amount as a true freshman, because that is still a transition that we need to figure out if he's able to do. I think that he will at some point, but I think that the big end position is more of where Burnham is trending at this point. So the Viper part, I would sell that one.
If he's pushing for a starting, I'm with you, sell. If he's pushing for a starting job at Viper, I think that means something went terribly wrong. And it means just Jordan and Junior are just awful this spring.
Isn't it?
And
I also think it's more
Boubacar as well.
likely. I think it's more likely if you're moving a big end to Viper. I think RJ Oben would probably be my first choice of a guy that maybe you would move over there. I mean, personally, I don't know.
Reason I tend to agree with you. The only reason that I could say maybe not is Bryce. If Josh is just too good, he's got to start somewhere, because you got to think about the future as well. What about next year? Okay, so you have RJ this year, and you have Bryce learn under him, and then next year you've got Josh and Bryce taking over, right? But I think if anything, if those other guys are struggling at Viper, I think they're going to still keep Josh at big end, because you don't want to have to put Bryce there this early, because we're talking about the spring.
Right.
If one of the two Vipers is struggling, I think it's Boubacar that gets there, and that's going to be the next buy, sell, or hold, which is I as I'm reading it, I'm like, I should probably stop for this one. Jimmy McGill, buy, sell, or hold. Boubacar Traore passes Jordan Patel on the depth chart at Viper.
In the spring, I would say sell. Could it happen at some point this offseason or into the season? I could see it. There could be a path, right? I'd be more willing to buy, but I will sell for the spring aspect of this, just because, hey, man, Jordan is a guy that the staff likes, obviously. He's a guy that has flashed a lot in certain areas, and I think that he will be the starting Viper after the spring. So I will sell that just for the spring aspect of everything.
I'm going to bring up one of our buy, sell, or holds, Ryan, because I think it is relevant to the conversation here. Sure. This is the spring that the light goes on for Jordan Patel, and it's the Deion Colsey one, and he becomes what we're expecting him to be.
It's going to be my hold. It's going to be my hold. It's going to be my hold because everybody that's watched this channel knows that I really do like the talent of Jordan Patel, and I always have. But I was expecting a big boom this past season, and the boom didn't happen except for one football game, right? Really. So I'm going to hold because I'm still optimistic that he can get there, but I'm not going to predict that he will get there. So it's a hold for now. I hope that he does, because, hey, man, if Jordan Patel is the best version of himself in 2024, your defense is going to be really, really good. Because that's the one spot at Viper where you're just like, you need something to happen, something to click.
If we get bowl version of Jordan Patel every week, you're going to be really good there.
just make every week a bowl game the last 2 years, and you're going to get like
every week's our Super Bowl. That's what they say, right?
Seriously.
They need to pound that into Jordan Patel's head. I think Jason Smith nailed this, Ryan. Jordan is this year's Marist for him. So much potential. And this is exactly where you were all last year about Marist. And I was on board with you. Could Marist be a breakout player? Yes, but at this point in time, I got to see it. And we saw it. I mean, he was a much, much better player last season. I'm hoping that Jordan can be the same guy, because here's the crazy thing, Ryan. This is the frustrating, but also frustrating thing about 23, but exciting about 24. Think about how good the Notre Dame defensive line was this year, and you got almost nothing from the Viper position. Almost nothing.
Very, very little. Yeah.
Right now, if he's just good, not even done, like reach his full, if he's just good, good. I think to the specific question from Jimmy McGill, I think if you were to say buy, sell, or hold, Boubacar Traore passes Junior Tuihalamaka, I'd buy that.
Sure.
But Jordan Patel, I just think Jordan, as a fifth-year guy, is going to, in the number of reps he has and the flashes he's shown, he's going to get the benefit of the doubt unless he just does something to warrant not playing anymore, which could happen. But we haven't heard anything like that about Jordan in a couple of years, so hopefully that continues.
Yeah.
Jimmy McGill had another one, Ryan. Buy, sell, or hold. Christian Gray cements his spot over Jaden Mickey.
I'm actually going to buy that one, because I think that Christian Gray is going to be the breakout star this year for the team. And I think that you're going to see it starting in the spring. And it's nothing against Jaden Mickey. I think Jaden Mickey will still play a lot in 2024. But I believe that there's a reality where Christian Gray is the starter at the end of the spring practice, and he rides that to potentially being a big-time player in 2024. So buying the Christian Gray hype.
Agree. I still think Jaden Mickey's going to play a bunch. He's going to be a very important player for Notre Dame this year. But I agree, as far as the starter, I think it's going to be very clear that Christian Gray is the best. I mean, I think Christian Gray, Ryan, is you know what? I don't even need to add to it. You said it. He's going to be the breakout star. He's going to be the guy that kind of comes out and establish himself. Agree with you completely.
He
John
might be your
A1,
most talented corner. He might be your most talented corner on the roster. I
physically
mean,
talented.
there's an argument.
I don't
Yeah,
I don't think he'll be better than Benjamin Morrison this year.
sure.
But as far as just raw, could he be better as a sophomore than Ben was a sophomore? It's possible.
Yeah.
He won't have the reps that Benjamin had as a freshman, but it's possible. He's a very talented kid. Very talented kid.
Yeah.
John A1 with a buy-seller hold. Jack Kaiser will be the starting will linebacker. The Mike linebacker and Rover are the two spots open for competition.
Yeah, I'll buy that one. I'll buy that one. I think that full transition is going to happen, and I think that Jack Kaiser is a player that Notre Dame is obviously high on, and it has Al Golden's trust, right? So I will say yes, he will be. I will buy that he will be the starting will linebacker for Notre Dame after the spring and probably into the 2024 season. I will buy that one.
I think he'll be the starting will. I buy that as well, but I'm hoping that he doesn't just get planted at will and stays there. I will say it again. I just don't think you're using Jack's skills effectively if you just plug him into one spot. I think he needs to be a move around guy. Some weeks he's coming off the outside. Some weeks you're playing more on the inside. I think he needs to move around because like when they use Jack correctly, Jack's a playmaker. He is. I just don't know if Jack's a playmaker playing inside, attacking A and B gaps all game. That's just where I don't know that he is that guy consistently. Ryan S7 with a buy-seller hold. The defense wins the jersey scrimmage. That's the scrimmage they have the week before the blue gold game. Whoever wins it then gets to wear whatever the home jersey or whatever jersey for the practice. Or I forget exactly how it is, but something like that.
I'll sell it. I'll sell it. I'll say the offense wins that one because I think by the end of spring, we're going to see the offense take a dramatic jump. I think the defense obviously will be good. And I would think that the defense will start out faster than the offense this spring because that's typically how that thing works, right? But I will say the offense wins in that scrimmage. And I say that so I'm going to sell that take that the defense wins.
I will sell it as well, Ryan. I think because I'm working with the assumption that they're going to let Riley Leonard play, like you know what I mean, like they're going to let him play in that scrimmage, and I think they're going to make some plays there. I do. I think this offense is. I'm looking forward to it. Here's one from Ronaldo Wins. Buy, sell, or hold. Tyson Ford plays himself into the rotation.
I'm selling it for now. I mean, I just need to see it partly, right? Like I need to see it. I've been hearing about Tyson Ford for the last couple years. I've been at a practice with Tyson Ford, and I see the athleticism, I see the flashes, but it hasn't tangibly turned into legitimate playing time at this point. So one, I need to be able to see it. And then two, Brian, I ultimately think that Tyson Ford is kind of in a weird spot right now because he's in a stage physically where I'm like, is he stay at big end? Does he outgrow it at some point? Like he's just kind of that weird middle ground of big end 3 technique that I think that we need kind of a answer for long term during his career. So I'm going to sell it just for the simple fact of I need to see it partly, and I think he's a little bit of a weird middle ground right now from a physical development standpoint.
That's why I have a hard time talking about Brendan Vernon because I'm like I don't know where to play him. I had somebody reach out to me recently, like, "Are you not high on Brendan Vernon anymore?" I'm like, "What do you mean? Well, you don't talk." I'm like, "I don't know where to talk. I don't know talk about him at the end. I don't know talk about him in the D tackle show. I don't know where he's going to play." Tyson's in that boat. I'm selling as well because I'm taking a little bit more of a I need to see it approach this offseason with certain guys at certain positions than I have in the past if they've been on campus for a period of time and we just haven't seen anything. Right? Or we've seen patterns like Deion Colsey. It's not that Deion hasn't shown us something. He has. He's shown us this guy can be really good. I mean, Ryan, we've talked about it. You and I were right there at the Syracuse game watching him where he should have had 10 or 11 catches against Syracuse. That's how often he was getting open in that game.
Could just rant a bunch of comebacks all day.
Oh, yeah. And
easy. Yeah.
But it's A, can he stay healthy? B, can he do it consistently? I mean, there's all those questions that he has to prove it to us. And I think we took a healthy approach to that last year with guys like Maris Leafau, and I'm going to do that more. So I'm selling it, but I'm hoping that this is one that we're wrong on because I'll say this. If the light goes on for Tyson Ford, he's one of your more talented players. There's no doubt that Tyson's one of your most talented players. You talk about earlier, like what could convince you to move Josh Burnham to Viper if there's an issue over there? It's Tyson Ford breaking out. That's exactly where it is. Tyson just comes out there at 275 and he's just rushing the passer, dominating the run, and the top 100 player we saw coming out of high school. Here he is. He's arrived. Right. Now it could be, hey, our Vipers aren't playing well. Let's move Josh back over there. Him and Bubakar are going to take that sucker over, and we're going to be lights out because we're going to have RJ and Tyson and Bryce Young at big end and Burnham and Bubakar at field end, at Viper, and let's go rock and roll and put the nation's best defensive line on the field. That's to me the kind of potential Tyson has. But how do I predict that when he's literally played like a handful of snaps and mop-up duty in 2 years? I can't. Yep. But I think the question, I liked the question because it does remind us that this is a kid that has some really good God-given ability. The light goes on, you get fired up about. And along those same lines, Ryan, we have Hayden 32 with a bistellar hold. With Rubio gone from the team, Onye steps up big and becomes the guy in the rotation behind Mills and Cross.
I'm going to buy it, but not buy it as in he's the only guy behind Mills or Cross. But if I'm talking about so I'm buying it in the sense of, is Onye the number one backup at the end of spring and the guy that has cemented himself as the number one interior depth guy? I'll buy that one because I think he's physically gifted. And I think that he played a decent amount last year and he's only going to continue to get better and hopefully more comfortable. And I just think that experience is going to go a long way. So I'll say that I'll buy it for him being the number one interior defensive line depth player, but not necessarily the only guy, right? Like, it's not like he's going to be starting at both nose. It's not that he's going to be the main backup at nose and 3 technique. But if you ask me, who's the best backup interior player you have after spring, I'm going to say it will be Jason Onye. That's my tip. That's my stance.
Yeah, I think he will be that next guy. I'm buying that. Yes. But like you said, he won't be the only guy. I think Donovan Heinisch is going to play this spring. You know, the guy that I'm most looking forward to seeing, I'll give mine. I'm curious if your answer is the same or if it's somebody else. The defensive tackle I'm most excited to see play this spring. For me, it's Devin Houston. I really want to see, because I think Armel might still be a year away, but I think Devin Houston's a guy that I have my eye on as, could this be the breakout guy that forces his way into the rotation with Gabriel Rubio out? You know, somebody asked a question the other day about, could somebody get Wally pipped? And I didn't even think about this one, but because I'm thinking starters, but it could be a guy like Gabriel Rubio. You come back in the fall, but you really want to let Donovan Heinisch and Devin Houston and Armo Mukum have 15 practices without you? You know, like you may realize, like, you know, hey, these guys are pretty good. So I really want to see Devin Houston, but I'd be shocked if Jason Onye is not that next guy. I think Jason Onye has that really good, like, this guy is a dynamic backup, and we are kind of like, it's going to suck to lose Riley Mills next year, but I'm feeling pretty good about Jason Onye being able to step in and continue that playmaking ability at that position.
Because he brings so much versatility to the table too, because like he can play 3, but if you're going to an odd man front where you're like, I need a guy to play 4-eye, a little bit, you know, all over the place, Jason Onye is perfect for that because he's super long and he's twitched up. Like I think he has a chance to be really good there. And I would agree with you. I'm interested to see Devin Houston. I'm interested to see Armel Mukum, because I'm a believer that, like, if Armel, whenever it hits for Armel, right, whenever that switch goes off, he could be a stud. Like, it really could. I don't know if it'll be this offseason, but I think at some point the light will go on. And when it does, he could be your best interior defensive lineman at some point in his career. Like, I think he has that upside to him.
I'll say this, Ryan. If there comes a day where the light goes on at the same time on the same defensive line for Armel, Bubakar, and Bryce Young, this is going to be a freaking ridiculous defensive line. Yeah. It really will. Because, I mean, those are 3 incredibly, like, first-round draft pick talents. Would you agree with that? I mean,
they look the part.
I do.
Certainly, yeah. Yep,
they're
the part. Yep.
all a long way away from that, right? Sure. But that's the thing that excites me, is there is, and I didn't even mention Brendan Vernon. I didn't mention Devin Houston. I didn't even mention Logan Thomas. I didn't mention Cole Mullins. I didn't mention Christopher Burgess. I mean, that's what kind of gets you fired up, is if Al Golden is the coach we hope he is, dude's going to
Yep.
be working with some absolute monster balls of clay in the next
You mean Al
couple of years,
Washington?
man. Al Washington. What did I say? Al
No,
Golden?
Al Al Golden,
Al,
yeah, yeah.
Al
Just make sure.
Washington is what I meant to say. Yes,
Yeah.
you are correct. Al Washington is
Yep.
what I meant to say. Zibby's boxing gloves with a buy, sell, or hold, Ryan. Adon Schuler takes advantage of Rod Hurd not being here in the spring and claims the starting safety spot opposite of Xavier Watts.
I mean, somebody has to start coming out of the spring, right? It has to be in that starting spot. So, yes, I will buy that. I think that Adon Schuler will be the number one on the other side of Xavier Watts leaving the spring. The question will be when Rod Hurd does get on campus, can he hold off Rod Hurd? Can he show that he can be the guy? Does he gain enough trust in the from the defensive staff to be that guy full time and to be the de facto number one opposite Xavier Watts? That's the question, but I will buy it for the spring that Adon Schuler is the main starter leaving the spring opposite Xavier Watts. I'll buy that.
I'm going to buy that as well. I think Adon's going to play well enough to where Rod Hurd has to beat him out if he's going to be the starter. I'm going to buy that.
Yep.
The dark horse for me in this conversation, because I found out yesterday there's a good chance he's actually going to be available for the spring. The dark horse for me is Luke Talich as being the guy that could potentially take advantage most of Rod not being around. But right now, I just think Adon's just got that all-around game, and he can run, he can hit, to be that guy. I'm with you. So let's get the last two, Ryan, that these are kind of staff buy, sell, or holds. Number one, Notre Dame will be better at defensive end, and I'm looking into this from both positions, not just the defensive end and then the Viper, but both positions. They're going to be better on the I'm going to give you one of scouting draft terms. Notre Dame's going to be better on the edge this season than they were last season, and we're going to feel that way coming out of the spring.
Buying. Yes, I'm buying because you have a good amount of proven guys, or at least guys that have played some in Notre Dame. Jordan Botelho, Joshua Burnham's played a decent amount, but you also have who I believe, although I like Javonte Jean-Baptiste, but I remember leaving the spring last year, Brian, it was like, Javonte looks like he's going to be a good player for Notre Dame, right? But I think that he ended up being even a better player than what you thought coming out of spring. I think that RJ, you'll have a higher expectation as far as what RJ can be coming out of spring than what you had of Javonte last year. And I think that Joshua, you'll still have Jordan Botelho, you still have Joshua Burnham, having Bryce Young in that room, having some of the younger guys in that room now, having Boubacar in that room. I think that you'll feel better about the depth and overall and the impacts. Because although Nana ended up being a pretty good rotational player for you in 2023, I don't think anybody left spring last year being limited. Nana, man, what a dynamic player. You have a lot more dynamic ability in this two to three deep, potentially at edge.
Agree. We were talking about Nana being a great leader coming out of spring last year. Yeah. Great motor guy, great example guy. And that's exactly what it was in the fall.
Glue guy.
Glue guy. Makes toughnesses off smarts and wit and motor and just giving you everything he's got. There was never a time in the last 2 years where I ever left a game thinking, Nana didn't give me everything he's got. Never once. Right. Every single time that kid was on the field, like you're getting the best of what he's giving you everything he's got. There's never a question. You always say, if you could put that guy's heart in this guy's body, I often wonder if you could put like his motor and all that into Jordan Botelho's body and kind of player that could be, be a pretty good player. Sure. Last one for the defense, Ryan, and we'll do a couple team recruiting ones. Coming out of the spring, the storyline is going to be that the Notre Dame secondary for 2024 is going to be better than the Notre Dame secondary for 2023, and keeping in mind that Notre Dame had one of the 5 best secondaries in production in college football last year. So the storyline coming out of the spring of 2024 is that Notre Dame's secondary is going to be even better than it was in 2023.
I can buy that. Yeah, I can buy it. It's not like a crazy buy. Like I'm just so like on that take that I'm just taking it to the bank, but I can buy it in the sense of Cam Hart was a really good player for Notre Dame, but I will maintain, I think that Christian Gray has higher upside as a coverage corner than what Cam Hart has as a coverage corner. Now, Cam brought the all-around game, which you loved. I mean, him against screen was fantastic, right? When him being able to come up and be physical, it was great. But I think that our excitement is going to be, we expect Christian Gray to be a stud this year as a fan base, right? Like we expect him to be really good.
Mhm.
We expect Benjamin Morrison to be even better than what he was in 2023 as a sophomore. You expect Xavier Watts, who really hasn't played a ton of football at safety still, man. Like he's still growing. I think the expectation should be that Xavier Watts is even better in 2024 than he was in 2023 as well. And then all due respect to DJ Brown, who was a good player for Notre Dame, or a solid player for Notre Dame, I should say. I think even if it's a Don Schuler and you haven't seen Rod Hurd yet, I think that you feel better about getting more impact at the other safety spot than Xavier Watts as well, with the Don Schuler and some of those young cats as well. So I will buy that one. Again, it's not emphatic, but I will buy it comfortably,
Yeah.
is how I would kind of phrase it.
So Chris Fortson said sell because Cam Hart is gone. And my whole thing is I don't actually expect – I'm fine with that comment. I don't expect Christian Gray to be better in 2024 than what Cam Hart was in 2023. Doesn't have to be. The reason that I'm buying here as well is because it's not just about that one position. I think there's a chance that Christian could be as good as Cam in different ways. His impact will be different than what Cam's impact was. His impact will be, you can't throw to that side anymore. Like, he's great man coverage. It gives them a chance to do more things from a pure coverage standpoint. Maybe they can pressure even a little bit more because there's a little bit more faith that you can play pure one now, where Cam would play a lot of off man and drive downhill. It's going to be different, but I think Benjamin Morris is going to take that big year 3 leap. Benjamin was very good in coverage last year, but there's parts of his game that needed work. I think that's going to happen now in year 3. Xavier Watts, I don't think will have the production he'd had this year from like a 7 interception standpoint, because I don't think people are going to throw at him as much. But to your point, I think he's going to be a better all-around player, which is why he came back. Is because he knows his all-around game needs to get better. The NFL doesn't care that I had 7 interceptions. If I'm not good here, need to improve there, he'll be that way. But I expect them to be better at the other safety position. I think the depth at safety is going to be significantly better. And another thing is, I think at the very least, it's going to be a wash at nickel. But I think if at some point in time that it's Jordan Clark and Micah Bell, that's going to be a better 1-2 punch than Thomas Harper, who I'm very high on, and Clarence Lewis. That's where I'm coming from. So that's why I do think even without Rod Hurd being here this spring, I think we're going to feel a lot better about the safety position with a Don Schuler, with Luke Talich. It wouldn't shock me if we see some of Clarence Lewis playing some back end safety this spring now.
Sure.
So I think we'll see that. And and again, Christian Gray and Jaden Mickey being a year older. So I do think we're gonna be that. Plus, I think the pass rush is going to be better this year, which is going to then result in more production from that. So I do think it's going to be better. It's not going to be, it can't be that much better because it was a tremendous secondary this past year. But like next year, some of those, like the interception against Ohio State, things like that happen. You're going to have a Don Schuler in year 2 doesn't pedal into the end zone on 3rd and 19 against a seam route. A Don Schuler with his football IQ squeezes on that and makes that play. Luke Talich makes that play. Ben Minnick makes that play where Ramon Henderson couldn't.
I think you can cause more disruption potentially in 2024, especially because Cam was great, right? People didn't throw at Cam a ton. But the one knock on Cam is that from a ball skills perspective, he didn't create a ton of turnovers, right? Like he only had 2 interceptions in his career, and both interceptions came in the same game against Wisconsin a couple years ago. So it's not like he forced a ton of turnovers. I know he had forced a couple of fumbles this year, but I think that Christian Gray's ball skills could lead to some more turnovers. I think that the nickel position could lead to a couple more turnovers potentially with whether it's Jordan Clark or Micah Bell. And I think that you have maintained your guys that have been the most disruptive from this past season, and that is Xavier Watts, and that is Benjamin Morrison. So I think even if you're asking just which one could be more disruptive and which one could be more impactful, I think 2024 can, because I think there's a lot of ball skills in that secondary right now as well.
Agree. That's a good one, Ryan. So let's get a couple of these team recruiting ones out of the way now. Number 1, Ryan S7. Notre Dame seals the deal with over 2.5 recruits during the Blue Gold game weekend. So it's more of an over-under actually than it is a buy, sell, or hold, but we can go with it. I'll allow it.
You'll allow it. Or over-under. So I'm trying to, man, it's such an interesting question because it's going to be like, one, what the final list looks like for the Blue Gold game. We have a few visitors on the visitor list at irishbreakdown.com already, but it's also going to come to effect of like, how many spots are still open, right? Like if Notre Dame has like 3 or 4 guys that come off the board or commits over the next couple months, before the blue gold game, even, how many guys are you kind of waiting on there? I'll say over just because we always see a big push during the blue gold game. So if you ask me how many guys over under 2.5 that are at the blue gold game that eventually commit to Notre Dame, whether it's right after or down the road, I'll say over, but it's not like an emphatic over, like the kind of the last question. But I'll say over. Sure.
I would. My only thing is I would need a little bit more clarity. He says during the blue gold game weekend. I'm going to go under if it's about them committing during the weekend, because Notre Dame doesn't really push for that anymore. They oftentimes don't want kids to make decisions.
Go home and think about it.
We saw that with CJ May, right? CJ May made an emotional decision in the Ohio State game, and then he was like, I want to take visits now. This is why they don't like to do that. So now over. So I'm selling that one because of during, but I do think it'll be over on the number of uncommitted players that visit that end up in the class. Definitely going over on that one.
Which is so are exactly the same, right? Like, So
Yep.
Players that visited Notre Dame for the blue gold game eventually ending up in the class for Notre Dame over 2.5.
Way over. Yep. Because there'll be some 26 guys that they get from there as well. And if they go over that weekend, it'll be because of that right there. It'll be a couple 26 kids commit, like we saw with like Brandon Davis Swain a couple years ago. But hey, what happened to him? He committed during the blue gold game weekend. How did that end up? Right? He left. Because it was an emotional decision, and that's something that I think the staff is trying to have less of.
That was still one of the weirdest commitments of my career so far. Was Brandon Davis Swain.
Very. Like he was there and then gone. And you never heard.
That was and he was also like, really, Brandon Davis Swain's committing? Oh, that's interesting one. Yeah.
Ryan S7, IB buy, sell, or hold. IB staff will get to watch more than the first 5 periods and more than 3 practices. That is a sell. We will have better access this year than we had last year. But as far as more than 3 fulls, that is a sell. Right. 13 reasons why buy, sell, or hold someone not – this is one of the easiest ones. 13 reasons why buy, sell, or hold someone not on last year's roster will flash and earn a starting job.
So, yes, buy, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
lots of them.
You can go with Chris Mitchell. You can go with Bo Collins at some point. You can
Riley
go
Leonard.
With,
Jordan Clark, Rod Hurd, RJ Oben.
We could even cheat and just say the kicker, right? The kicker from South Carolina is going to be Mitch Jeter's going to be the starting kicker. Like, absolutely, yes.
You mentioned Joseph Vincey. Would not be a shock if Joseph Vincey's the team's starting long snapper this year. Yeah, I think someone not on last year's roster will flash in a starting job. Absolutely. I'll be shocked.
Aiden Harrison at kick returner. Like, yes.
If if that answer is not yes, like shocked. Last one, Ryan P. Fluke. 1 says Notre Dame will have 23 commits by the end of spring ball.
23 commits by the end of spring ball. So right now we're at
17 right now.
Yep. Now right now we're at 17.
Public. Let's make it. I'm going to add one word. Public commitments by the end of the spring.
So then I'll sell that then if it's public commits. Could it be silent included that get up to 23? Sure. But I will say I'll sell it if it's a public commitment because we know how that stuff works, guys. Like things get spaced out, graphics are made, announcements are set. Like there is so much, they're going on 247 YouTube channel. Like there's so many tangible things that go involved in those types of decisions. So I will say sell that we'll have 23 public commitments by the end of spring. There'll be a couple.
That's gonna do it for those, Ryan. We're gonna have one more buy, sell, hold segment, folks. This has been a lot of fun. We're gonna get to some more that were from some of the people that didn't follow the instructions. They didn't give us spring buy, sell, holds. They gave us team ones, but they were just so good that we're like, well, we're still going to have to do them, but we'll do them in a different segment. So we'll get to that here in a minute. Do us a favor, folks. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast. If you're not listening, or if you are listening via podcast platform, like on Spotify, which is one of our partners, give us a 5-star review. We would greatly appreciate that. And you are missing out on some intel on the board right now that Ryan already put up because he's always working. Some intel on Ivan Taylor. What's the latest with Ivan Taylor now that Chris O'Leary's gone? That is on the premium message board, but is only on the premium message board. You're going to want to check that out. We'll have another big recruiting intel piece coming up here very soon, but those are things that you only get on the premium message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So, Ryan, we're going to have some fun here. We did have a couple. We're not doing a mailbag today. We did have a super chat from Raymond Harden. He says, for the dog treats. Thank you very, very much, Raymond. We had to get this one, Ryan. This is the only buy-seller hold that we're bringing up that's not from a premium message board because I just liked it too much. Beezer 12 washing beard, buy-seller hold. Stephen A. Smith and Paul Feinbaum have a combined IQ of 95.
I'm buying that they have they have higher than a 95 as just a I'm sorry. No, I incorrectly read that. I'm sorry. I thought we were talking about just an actual IQ. I am selling that they have a 95 in football IQ because all due respect to Stephen A. Stephen A knows basketball. Like I'll listen to him on his basketball takes, but he doesn't know ball. He doesn't know football that well. And
it's the same guy that thought Dwayne Haskins' best attribute was his running ability.
Yes.
Like the least mobile quarterback Ohio State's ever had.
And then Paul Feinbaum's just an SEC guy, so he doesn't know that there's anything outside of SEC country. So yeah,
terrible takes.
I will sell that to have that.
Takes.
Yes.
Yes. Buy, seller, hold. They have a combined IQ of 95. I'm selling it because I don't think their football IQ is that high. I don't.
Yes.
I don't.
All right. I just had to go there at one point. So yeah.
What's that?
I thought it said regular IQ. I thought it said regular IQ at first. I'm like, I think they're smart people overall. But
yes. I like that he put football IQ because it is not high. All right, let's get to some more questions from the board, Ryan. These are going to be more big picture 2024 season type of things from people that didn't listen to the instructions, but they still resulted in some very good questions. So we got a couple from Tommy Reese's bail money. No, buy, seller, hold. Notre Dame finishes the year with a top 10 defense and a top 10 offense.
Buying it. Yeah. I mean, they did it this year. I think the defense is going to be, it's going to be sustainable defensively. And I think the offense is going to be even better than it was in 2023 with Mike Denbrock now a part of the fold. So I will buy that one. Yes. Top 10 in both attributes.
Agree. I'm a buy on that one as well. Notre Dame has 2,000 yard scrimmage yard. I like this. 2,000 yard scrimmage backs and a 1,000-yard wide receiver.
Sell just because of the 1,000-yard receiver. I'm not sold that there's going to be a 1,000-yard receiver. Do I think that there's a good chance that both Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price go over 1,000 all-purpose yards? Yes, I can buy that one for sure. The wide receiver one, I need to see what it looks like after spring. Like, is Chris Mitchell really that dude? You know what I mean? And if guys are able to stay healthy, and there's a lot of variables that are going to be there. So I will sell that part of it, but I would buy just the first half of it.
Yeah, I mean, look, the reality is, Ryan, is if Logan Diggs and Audric Estime can go over 1,000 yards, both of them 1,000 yards in the same season, then there's no reason. And they did. They both did that. They both went over 1,000 yards of just offense, rushing and receiving 2 years ago. Then this group duo certainly can. And so, yeah, I'm there, but I'm with you. I don't think you can do that and have it. I think it's like one or the other. You're either going to have a 1,000-yard receiver and those, but like, I just don't know that. It's going to be tough. But yes, I would buy on the first one, sell on the second one, and I'm selling completely on the two together. Tommy Reese's bail money also says Notre Dame. This is a one for you, Ryan. This is for next year's draft. Okay. So get your thinking cap on related to Notre Dame. Buy, sell, or hold. Notre Dame has 6 or more players drafted in the first 3 rounds in next year's draft.
Sell. That's a lot, man. 6 in the first 3 rounds is a lot of dudes. I mean, I'm thinking like Benjamin Morrison obviously is going to be in that conversation. We're going to have Xavier Watts in that conversation. Maybe RJ Oben, but I mean, he's a question mark as of now. So even if I count him, that's only 3 defensively because it's a pretty young group. I wouldn't put Riley Mills in there right now. I wouldn't put Howard Cross in there right now. Offensively, who am I putting in?
Riley
there?
Leonard,
Mitchell Evans, maybe. Well, yeah,
Riley Leonard.
Okay, I'll give you Riley Leonard. But that's only 4, even if I count RJ Oben, and then maybe Mitchell Evans. But like, he's got some durability stuff, so like that's a tough conversation just in itself. So I will sell it because 6 is a lot, man. That's a lot of numbers in the first 3 rounds.
Do you think Chris Mitchell, if Chris Mitchell breaks out and has like if he repeats at Notre Dame what he did at FIU and runs what he says he ran, he could be that guy.
Yes.
But now you're stretching to get to 6,
Ryan.
Possible. Right.
Right.
Because you got to think about is a lot of Notre Dame's Go ahead. Sorry, Ryan. Go ahead.
Oh no, you're fine. You're fine. I think we're a little delayed. If he has 1,100 yards receiving at Notre Dame this next year and runs in 4.3s, he'll go in the top 3 rounds. But again, a lot of variables that need to kick in there.
Right.
So
Here's the thing also you have to think about. Some of Notre Dame's most talented players, a lot of Notre Dame's most projectable first 2-day, first 3-round guys are not going to be eligible for the draft after this year. I mean, you think of Jeremiah Love, you think of Jaden Greathouse, potentially Jordan Faison, although I think he still has a lot to prove. Charles Jagasol, Sullivan Absher, Christian Gray, Bryce Young, Kingston, Drake Bowen. I mean, you know what I mean? So like there's a lot of guys. Now, another guy to think about too, Ryan, because does a guy like Rod Hurd have a breakout year and run really well? So I mean, there's potential where certain things could happen. Jadarian Price has a breakout year, something like that, where Mitchell Evans is healthy and has a big year. I could see Notre Dame getting to 6. Riley Mills has the year we all are hoping he has. Could Notre Dame get there? Absolutely. But I think to your point, a lot has to go right for them to get to 6 or more by next year. And it's not even a given that all those guys would even go pro. I mean, it's not a given that Mitchell Evans comes out after next year. He may say, hey, I had a healthy season, but I need to have another one to go up the draft boards. I mean, there's that type of thing. So, I'm with you. I'm selling it. I think it's possible, but let's let some things play out first. Let's actually see RJ open in the Notre Dame uniform. Let's see Rod Hurd in the Notre Dame uniform. Let's, see what Jack Kaiser can do as an every down guy, because, hey, we've seen him mocked in the first round, Ryan. So
yes.
I'm actually kind of sorry.
I actually want to do some research on it and see when the last time Notre Dame had at least 6 guys drafted in the first 3 rounds. Cause I feel like that doesn't happen too often, man. I have to think that
they got close in 2016 or in 2013. They got close. I think it was 2016. Cause they had 5. No, they had 6. Yeah, you had Ronnie Stanley in round 1, Will Fuller in round 1, Jalen Smith in round 2, Nick Martin in round 2, Kavari Russell in round 3, CJ Prosise in round 3, and Sheldon Day in round 4. So he was the 7th, but he went lower. And then they had 5 a couple years ago. Eichenberg, Banks, and Owusu all went in round 2, and then Tremble and Hainsey went in round 3. And then Ian Book was next round 4.
Tommy Tremble went that high.
Yeah.
I always forgot Tommy Tremble went that high.
And then 2014, they had 5. Zach Martin, Stephon Tuitt, Troy Nicholas, Lewis Nix, and Chris Watt. So there have been some years but where they've gotten close, but they've only gone at that number once. That was the 2016 team, which Ryan, I mean, you're talking about some generational type of talents. Ronnie Stanley, Will Fuller, Jalen Smith. Those were special dudes. And a lot of Notre Dame's dudes like that aren't going to be draft eligible after this year. So that's the other thing to think about as well. That's a very good question, though. A very good question. Polaris 6. Will they buy, sell, or hold? Irish go 12-0, and Riley Leonard is a top 3 Heisman finalist. I will say this, Ryan. If the first is true, the second will be true.
Sure.
Right?
This is going to be
my hold. Go hand in hand.
Yeah, this is going to be my hold. Look, man, that's a lot to put on a team. Is it possible? Sure. Is both possible? Sure. It's tough to get in the same season first and foremost. So I'm going to say hold just because that's a lot to put on one team. I'm
gonna have you give this to you in a different way, so that way you can do a buy or sell. Okay. Buy, sell, or hold. Notre Dame is capable of going 12-0 and Riley Leonard being a top 3 Heisman finalist.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Both things could happen. I mean, you could also throw in Riley Leonard goes in the first round in next year's draft. Like all those things are on the table. It's just, again, there's a lot of variables together and it's just a lot to put on the table for one team. So is it possible? Well, yes, absolutely. It's possible.
I mean, Riley Leonard could win the Heisman Trophy and Notre Dame wins a national championship and they don't go 12-0 in the regular season. That's possible, right? Going 12-0 is not an easy thing to do.
Not easy at all.
Buy, sell, or hold from Floating Irish. Okay. Buy or sell, and we can also hold, on Jalen Sneed and Drake Bowen being more productive than J.D. Bertrand and Maris Leofau.
I will say sell because I think there's going to be more of a rotation at linebacker this year than there was last year. JD was the leading tackler for Notre Dame for 3 straight years, and a lot of it was out of necessity because there just wasn't a lot of great depth at times during his time at Notre Dame. So I'm going to sell it because I think that Drake is going to play for sure. I think Jalen Sneed could play a lot. I think Jaden Osbury could play. I think that obviously we're going to see Jack Kaiser play a ton for Notre Dame, and I think Kingston's going to play a decent amount in 2024 as well, and probably play a lot at some point. So I'm going to sell it just based upon I think it's going to be more of a committee approach and a just I think that that's going to be a little bit more of a
Yeah.
group effort than it is of just 2 players involved.
I will say this, Ryan. I'm selling on it because I don't know if Jalen Sneed is going to be able to win a full-time job yet. I need to see him do that. If he does, if Jalen Sneed is good enough to lock down a starting job where it's like, that's the dude, then I would actually buy that because to be more productive, you'd need 14 tackles or loss or more, right? Because he had 13 and a half last year. You need 6 sacks or more. I could see that if the light goes on for Jalen. But
Sure.
to your point, we don't even know if he's going to be a full-time starter or not yet. And I also agree with you too. What could hurt that is they could actually be more impactful and maybe not produce quite as much because to your point, we're going to see Jaden Osbury more. We're going to see, Kingston more. We're going to see more of that rotation. So, and if the offense is as good as we think, then they're going to be nickel a whole lot. And they may not both be on the field as much.
There's a world that the linebacker position is so deep that Drake Bowen ends up having 60 tackles and 7 tackles for loss, but he's a stud, right? Like there's that reality because it's just like Kingston's going to play and a couple of those guys are going to play. Like there's a reality out there that it's incredibly impactful, but it's not the like full stats that you would expect out of that impact.
But if the light goes on for Jalen Sneed, Drake could absolutely do that. But then Jalen also has that kind of production because if the light goes on for Jalen, I think he becomes a phenomenal third down weapon. I do.
Yeah.
I just need to see the light go on first. And we don't even know if Drake's gonna figure it all out this year as well. I think I think there's a good chance the production could be better, but the overall consistent level play isn't quite as good because they're younger players. Then he also Floating Irish also had another one, Ryan. Buy, sell, or hold. Does one running back get to over 1,000 yards rushing this season?
That's a tough one, actually, because I do think there's going to be a little bit of a committee approach, at least a 2-headed monster there. But I will say buy. I think Jadarian Price is going to be really good, but I'm on the Jeremiah Love wagon. I am. I think that there's a world where Jeremiah Love only has like 180 rushes, but goes over 1,000 yards just because he's so explosive, man, and just a crazy yard per carry average. So I will buy it, although I could see it not happening because they're just such a even workload potentially. But I will buy it.
Well, Ryan, here's the thing. Like, you look at the carries that the 2 backs had in 2022. Audric had 156. Logan had 165.
Mm-hmm.
If for Jeremiah or Jadarian, pick one, to have 1,000 yards on the number of carries that Logan Diggs had, they'd only have to average 6.1 yards per carry. That's it. To have 1,000 yards on the number of carries that Audric had 2 years ago, they would only have to average 6.4 yards a carry. They're both capable of that. That's not a lot of carries. Now, here's kind of the caveat that I would say is they could have both averaged the requisite number and not get the number of rushing touches for 2 reasons. One thing that's way different about this year than 2 years ago is you're going to have the quarterback taking some of that production away.
Sure.
I think you're going to be a little bit more big play in on offense where you're not going to have the number of opportunities overall as a team that you had 2 years ago where you needed to go on long scoring drives in order to get points all the time. I mean, it could be a thing where, Jeremiah didn't get any touches this drive because you ran a play action pass on the first play and threw the ball over top for a 60-yard touchdown to Jordan Faison or Chris Mitchell or Jaden Greathouse or Bo Collins or Deion Colsey or whoever, you know what I mean? Or Mitchell Evans or something like that. You know what I mean? And that's going to take away. Or, hey, Jadarian hasn't been on the field in 3 series because, Jeremiah housed the first play of the one series, and then Riley, took a read zone 50 yards in the next series, and they got into the goal line, and they put the goal line guy in. I mean, there's going to be some of that to hold the production down a little bit, potentially. But you're correct. I mean, you said 180 carries. I mean, if Jeremiah only has 150 carries and averages 6.7 yards per carry, that's 1,000 yards. I mean, so yeah, it's certainly possible. Certainly possible, because I think the quarterback being there could take away some opportunities, but there's also the flip side of it could create more big play opportunities where they don't need the volume that Logan and Audric had 2 years ago either. So it'll be interesting. But I'm going to buy it, Ryan. I don't know who it's going to be, but I think, look, even if you're on the Jeremiah Love train, why can't he have 1,000 and Jadarin have 800? Or Jadarin has 800 or has 1,000 rushing, but Jeremiah has more total yards, even though he doesn't get to 1,000. Right. I mean, both of those things could happen. These kids are dynamic. I mean, these kids are home runs waiting to happen. I think one of them is going to have a CJ Pro size type 6.7, Josh Adams, from 2017, where, they get to 1,000 yards on 140 carries or something crazy like that, because they're just ripping off big run after big run. I can see that. Certainly see that. All right, let's get down to a couple more here, Ryan. We have a lot more. Here's one from Kenny Moore. Buy, sell, or hold. My man Kenny, one of the OGs. Buy, sell, or hold. Riley Leonard starts all 12 regular season games.
Can you say that one more time? It cut in. I think my internet's a little funky.
Buy, sell, or hold. Riley Leonard starts all 12 regular season games.
Buying, baby. Give me the buy. I have no context to add to this other than I believe that he will stay healthy this year. I don't know why. It's a gut feeling.
Got another one from Kenny Moore, Ryan. Buy, sell, or hold. Any Notre Dame wideout, pick one, but some Notre Dame wideout this year is going to reach 900 yards receiving. Looks like we lost Ryan there real quick, so it looks like he's having some internet issues. So I'm going to answer this one. Buy, sell, or hold. Notre Dame has a receiver with over 900 yards this season. I'm going to buy that. I do think someone will get to 900. I just don't know that anyone is going to get to 1,000. Or that's my prediction on that one. Let's get to some more of these team buy, sell, or holds here. I'm going to do the best I can doing this solo. Diffusius says, no, buy, sell, or hold. Notre Dame having the best defense statistically since 1980. Man, that is a tough one. I got to think about this one, because Notre Dame has had some really good statistical defenses in the past. I mean, the 2012 team gave up 12 points a game. I mean, that's going to be hard to do, because they're just going to be playing better offenses. Yeah, they gave up 12.8 points per game, and that includes giving up 42 to Bama. That team only gave up 305.5 yards per game. This year's team gave up 276.3. Can Notre Dame really keep teams to less than 276.3? Boy, that's asking a lot. That's asking a lot. I'm going to have to sell that one, just because of that's asking a lot. I mean, the 1988 team, for example, gave up 11.2 points per game and only gave up a little over 300 yards per game, total yards per game. Boy, that's asking a lot. That's asking a lot. I'm going to sell that one. I think it could be a very, very good defense. I think the teams they play are too good for me to say it's going to be the best statistical defense since 1980. It could be the best defense, but best statistical, I don't know if I can go there, just because of the teams they play. We'll get to a few more here. All right. Here's one for misinformation, and I know, I'm going to hold on to that one, because I'm hoping Ryan can come back, because I want to ask that one with Ryan. Here's from Ronaldo Wins. He's got a couple here that are big picture team fall questions. Ronaldo Wins, buy, sell, or hold. Notre Dame has 2,000-yard rushers. I'm going to sell that. I don't think that's going to be possible. Even if Notre Dame has the most dynamic offensive line in college football this season, I don't think that's possible, because you're going to have the quarterback taking too many carries away for both of them to get over 1,000 yards. So I'm going to sell that one. We talked about the one where they both have 1,000 yards total, but two of them going over 1,000 yards rushing. I'm selling that. Ronaldo Wins also says the buy, sell, or hold. Hey, Ryan, you sound good? You get everything? Can you hear
I
me?
hope so. I hope we're okay now. Yeah,
Okay.
we'll see.
All right. So we had one, Ryan, that I wanted to ask that I passed because I wanted to ask with you because this kind of goes back to a conversation we had earlier. This is from
Okay.
Misinformation. Buy, sell, or hold. Kingston Viliama-Asa is the opening day starter at middle linebacker.
Yeah, I'm selling opening day. I do think there's a reality that where Kingston could start some point in 2024, but I would say that if I was a betting man, I would have it on Drake Bowen to start the 2024 season. So I will sell him as the opening day starter at Mike.
We're going to stay at linebacker for this next one, Ryan, from Ronaldo Wins. The linebackers are the buy, sell, or hold. The linebackers are the best unit on defense in 2024.
Selling that one as well. I think that the secondary has the inside shot at being the best unit on the defensive side of the football, and I would also put the defensive line potentially is even number two with your known commodities inside at defensive tackle. I mean, is there a world where the linebackers just boom and they're that type of unit? I mean, it's always possible, but if I had to be a betting man, I would sell there because I think that the secondary especially is going to be really good potentially in 2024.
Ryan, I will say this, and I want to get your immediate reaction to it. If the Notre Dame linebackers are the best unit on the Notre Dame football team in 2024, it means one of two things. It is an incredibly underachieving defense with loads of injuries in the secondary D line, or this is one of the best defenses Notre Dame has had in 30, 40 years. Because for them to be that good with those other groups, that means this defense is insanely good. It's going to be one of those two. If they're just a good defense, and the linebackers won't be the best unit. It's either really bad news or really good news if they're the best.
I agree because right now I think they're the clear third favorites of the three levels to be the best in 2024. So if they are the best, that tells you that there is a very good outcome or a less than ideal outcome in the situation. I hope it's the former there, but we'll never know.
Because you could argue just raw talent. The most raw talent is at linebacker. Just God-given talent. Drake Bowen, Jack Kaiser. Right. I mean, Jack Kaiser's an outstanding athlete. Jalen Sneed, Preston Zinner, Jaden Alsbury, Kingston, Bodie Cahoon, Teddy Rizak.
Right.
So, very talented. But you're talking about a defensive line that's going to have two 6-year seniors and a 5th-year senior, two 5th-year seniors starting up front. You're going to have a chance to have one of the best cornerback tandems in college football if Christian Gray's as good as we think he's going to be. And, oh, by the way, you have a unanimous All-American coming back at safety for the secondary. So it'd be asking a lot. A lot of people sticking on this Kingston is going to start one, Ryan. This is from Irish Cheesehead. He's got a few of them. Kingston Viliama-Asa is starting by the midway point of the 2024 season.
I buy that. Yeah, I could buy that at that point. I think that's where the transition potentially starts. Because I agree with you in the fact that I believe that Jack Kaiser could be a really good player moving around a ton. So I think there's a reality where Kingston takes over one of the inside spots and Jack is playing a lot, even starter caliber snaps, but he's moving around a little bit and kind of being a little bit of a Swiss Army knife. So I can buy that one. I can buy.
I also am more willing to buy that one because it doesn't say Mike. It just says starting. Right. And as I said before, I could see a scenario like everybody thinks if Kingston starts, it means Drake's not. Yeah. Ryan and I have been adamant about it. It could very well be because I don't even know that Kingston will necessarily be a full-time Mike when he first gets to Notre Dame. It wouldn't shock me if they cross-train him a little bit with the thought that he can do a little bit of both. But there could be a scenario where one of those two guys moves to Will and Notre Dame has both of them starting at some point.
I just hope they don't move Kingston to Viper. That's a joke, but yes. Not actually a joke, though.
Irish Cheesehead, buy, sell, or hold. Eli Raridan leads all tight ends in receiving yards.
I'm going to sell it just because as long as Mitchell Evans is back and healthy, I mean, he was your best pass catcher when he was healthy last year, and I think that he is going to return and potentially be one of the best tight ends in college football. So I think Eli is going to play a lot, obviously, this year as long as he's healthy. I think that he's going to become a weapon for Notre Dame's offense this year if healthy. But I still think that Mitchell Evans is the more likely player to be the leading receiver at tight end, barring any injury setbacks. So I will sell Eli being a higher volume getter than Mitchell, although I think he's going to have an impactful role in the Notre Dame offense.
The only way I could buy that is if you told me Mitchell's injury was going to keep him out for the first 6 games. Because even if it
Right.
keeps him out the first 3 or 4 games and Eli racks up a ton of yards and Mitchell comes back and he's a starter again, the number 2 tight end's not going to keep up the pace enough to stay there through games 12. It would only
Right.
be half the year. If half the year, then it's possible. Because I could see a scenario where if let's say you split it, Mitchell starts or Eli starts the first 6 with no Mitchell, and then Mitchell starts the last 6 as part of a rotation, where Mitchell is going to have more catches than what Eli had. But Eli could still maybe have more yards. I could see something like that, because he's just such a long, fast guy that he could be more of a Troy Nicholas type. Remember, Troy had that really high yards per catch average in that 1 year where he doesn't have the volume that Mitchell has, but he'll have, because Mitchell will make some stupid catch for 8 yards. Where you're like, dude, that was ridiculous. Like how, you know what I mean? But it's just like it went for 8 yards, where Eli's going to be running down the seams for big plays and beating teams over the top and stuff like that. So that's kind of picked that. Here's an interesting one from Irish Cheesehead. Buy, sell, or hold. At least 3 current members of the roster hit the transfer portal before the season opener. It's a no-brainer.
3 members of the Notre Dame roster.
Yeah.
The whole roster, we're saying.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Buy that.
They have to.
3? Yes.
They're at 88.
Yeah.
They have to.
Right, yeah.
I mean, unless you're going to get some medical retirements, you kind of have to. You're going to need that. So, yes, buy that one. Last one from Irish Cheesehead, Ryan. Buy, sell, or hold. J&J, which is what he calls Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love, finish as a top 5 rushing yards duo among Power 4 teams.
I'll buy that. Yeah, I'll buy that. If you extended it to like group of 5 or like maybe Toledo has like some stupid 1-2 punch or whatever, like that's always possible. But for it being a Power 4 conversation, I will buy that one. Yes, I will buy it.
I'm going to sell it simply because there's going to be some team that just does nothing but rush the football, and you're just going to see like a mess of yards, like Oklahoma State, right? Like that's a team that's, Ollie Gordon comes out and rushes for 1,700 yards and, your next guy rushes for 300 or 400, something like that. I mean, maybe. I would say this, if you're going to tell me that it's top 5 total yards, I'm buying without a question. I just still think there's just some teams that are just going to run it more than Notre Dame and not have a quarterback taking some of it away. So I'm selling that rushing yards, but if you're going to give it to me in total yards, I'm buying big time on that one, Ryan. Buying big time. Here's one from Lucky Duck 512. Buy, sell, or hold. Cam Williams leads the team in touchdowns, receiving touchdowns in 2024.
I'll sell it. I think that Cam's going to play a lot, but I think that there's still going to be some guys that are veterans that are going to cut into opportunity, obviously. I mean, talk about Chris Mitchell, Bo Collins, Jaden Greathouse, Jaden Thomas. I also think that the tight ends will be heavily involved in the red zone more than likely. I could see Mitchell Evans having a role in there. I could see the running backs just being more of the red zone weapons just in general in some capacity. So I will sell that one, although I do think that Cam will make a year 1 impact.
Here's one from Bergier. I hope I'm saying that right. Bergier 23. Here's a buy, sell, or hold. This is for the entire season. Kenny Minchie beats out Steve Angeli for the number 2 spot.
Man, I hope so. And I hope so just because I want the more talented player to eventually be the heir apparent type of situation, right? But I'm going to use my hold in this section. I haven't used the hold yet. I'm going to hold just because I'm cautiously optimistic for Kenny, but I feel like I keep counting out Steve, man, and he keeps just kind of doing his thing and doing his job, right? So I'll hold on that one.
I'm holding because I think it's going to be either Kenny or CJ. One of the 2 will do it, is why I'm holding. I just don't know that it will necessarily be Kenny. It could be. It certainly could be. Also from Bergier 23, buy, sell, or hold. An undefeated Notre Dame gets revenge on Louisville. So by that point in time, go ahead.
Yes.
I was just going to read the schedule just in case you were thinking who they had to play first. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I'm just gonna take it. I'm gonna buy it because I think as long as you get past Texas A&M, I think that you have a good opportunity to be undefeated before Louisville, and I think that Notre Dame gets payback against Louisville. I find it hard to believe that Notre Dame's going to lose to Louisville two years in a row. Like I just find it a little bit of a hard belief. So I think that there will be a little bit of bad taste in your mouth. And I think that you will come out against the Cardinals and whoop some butt.
I buy it too, Ryan. I think they beat Texas A&M, and then after that, you've got Northern Illinois at Purdue, Miami of Ohio before you play Louisville. So, yes, I think Notre Dame will be 4-0, and I think that Notre Dame is going to smash Louisville this year. I do. I think they're going to be really pissed off for that game. I do.
Yep.
And maybe that's more of a wishful thinking, but I do. And then the last one from Bergier 23, and Ryan, this is right up your alley, buddy. Buy, sell, or hold. Okay. Jeremiah Love makes the Doak Walker finalist.
I'm going to say because he has to share touches in the run game, especially with both Riley Leonard and Jadarian Price and the other running backs on the roster. I'm going to sell it. I think that he's going to be a very impactful player. I think he's going to have a great season. But, I mean, the Doak Walker Award winner last year ran for like over 1,400 yards in Ollie Gordon, right? So, I mean, I just don't think he'll have the sheer volume to 1,700. I don't think he'll have the sheer volume to be able to be in that conversation, but I do believe that he will be a very impactful player. But I'm going to sell the Doak Walker finalist conversation right now.
Buy, sell, or hold from Chief 1. Al Washington proves himself as to be a top D-line coach and his D-line to be a top 5 D-line unit in college football next year.
I don't know that many great defensive line coaches nationally, honestly. So I'm gonna say buy just out of ignorance, I guess. I think that he can have that ascension. I think if you saw the growth from year 1 to year 2 was tremendous growth as a coach, and if he takes another jump in year 3 with a decent amount of veterans coming back, I think that he can ascend to be in that type of conversation. Yes.
Well, and we both argue that they're going to have more talent on the D-line this year with the additions of R.J. Oben and Bryce Young and guys like that, plus Josh Burnhams and Bubakars and those guys getting older, that the rotation will have more talent this year. Also from Chief 1, Ryan, buy, sell, or hold. The offense as a whole plays like a top 5 offense in college football next year.
Buying it. Yeah, I'm fully in on it. As long as Riley Leonard stays healthy, and the wide receivers play up to the standard that we think that they can, I think that is a yes to me, because I think the running backs are going to be very good. I think your tight end position is going to be really good. I think the offensive line might have a couple bumps early on, but I think by the stretch of the season, they're going to be a very good unit at some point in the 2024 season. And you have a dynamic element at quarterback as long as he's healthy. So as long as there's not a long string of injuries, I believe that they can do that. Yes. So I will buy that.
Speaking along those lines, Ryan, this is from Gorm is or buy, sell, or hold. Notre Dame wins 2 games in the college football playoff in 2024. So first round game, quarterfinal game.
I'm going to buy it because I am very hopeful, right? Like I'm very hopeful. And I think that this team does have the opportunity to be very good. And when you just kind of look at some of the rosters around college football, I do think it's going to be another kind of open year, and it's going to be, there's going to be some decent parity in college football in 2024, similar to what it was in 2023. So I think Notre Dame has an opportunity there. So I'll buy it just off of being an optimist.
I'm buying it too, Ryan, and also partly because of what I broke down yesterday, which is what there's this angst about the, Notre Dame, if they're a top 3 or 4 team, should get a bye. And as I explained, if in 2018, if Notre Dame would not, if it was a 12-team playoff and you attribute teams to who they played, if Notre Dame would have gotten a bye in a 12-team playoff, they'd have played Georgia in round 2. If they would not have gotten a bye and had to play in round 1, they would have gotten, I think it was like West Virginia in round 1 and then UCF in round 2. I cheated a little bit and used UCF, even though they're in the Big 12 now, because there really wasn't another group of 5 team that could have got that. But the point being, it's going to be, flip it. You either get the group of 5 champ at the 12 seed, and then you have to play the worst of the 4 conference champions in round 2, as opposed to, and then the other year it was, you would have had to play in 2020, you'd have got Coastal Carolina in the first round, and then you would have gotten the winner of, and then you would have played, I think it was Cincinnati, who was the number 8 ranked team in the second round. If you got a bye, you'd had to probably play Texas A&M in the second round. So again, this actually creates an easier path to Notre Dame to win 2. The question is going to be, because can they win beyond 2? So I'm excited about this season. I'm an eternal optimist, Ryan, so I'm going to buy that as well. Here's a buy, sell, or hold from one of our OGs, John Klimek. Buy, sell, or hold. A linebacker leads the team in sacks this year.
Oh, I'm selling that one. I think my clear favorite is RJ Oben. I think that he is the guy that is most likely that guy, or else I think it's going to be somebody at the Viper position. Could it be Jalen Sneed if he's a full-time player? It's always
Yeah,
possible, right? But I'll lean towards the edge in the sack conversation for me.
agree. I agree with that, Ryan. All right, got some more here. We're on page 3 now, Ryan. So we are getting close to wrapping this bad boy up, but we do have some good ones here that I want to get to. Let's get to here. All right, I'm not going to ask that one. That was mean. Okay, here we go. Buy, sell, or hold. This is from I Am Tenzin, and I am not reading the rest of Kyle Wade's name, but it's from Kyle Wade. It's the year, buy, sell, or hold. It's the year youth really takes over. Over, under. So he's actually doing a little bit different. Over, under, 16 starters being third year or younger, since we have 4 to 6 year players on the roster. So 16 being third year younger. I'm going sell. Just thinking about this off. I mean, you're going to have Riley, because you'd have to have more than 6 seniors or older. Riley Leonard is in that group. Chris Mitchell's in that group. Mitchell Evans is in that group. Pat Coogan is in that group. Tosh Baker's in that group. So even if you only count one of those 2 starts, you're there. You have defensively, your defensive line wipes that out. You're going to have 5th or 6th year seniors at linebacker. That's 8. And you're going to have Xavier Watts as a 5th year senior. That's 9. You're going to have Jordan Clark at Rover. That's 10. And you're going to have Jack Kaiser. That's 11. So I will say this. I think that we're going to see a ton of freshmen, sophomores, and juniors in the rotation and in the 2 deep. The sophomore and freshman class, especially the sophomore class this year, Ryan, is going to make a big impact. But they're not going to dominate the starting lineup yet.
Yeah. I think
they're going to play a ton.
So I would agree there. I think it's sell. I just don't think there's enough available spots that there's not a proven veteran in. So I'll sell that one as well.
And then this is going to be the last one, Ryan.
Okay.
Oh, no, there's one more that I have to go with here. From Spark 5219, buy, sell, or hold. Mike Denbrock will have back-to-back Heisman Trophy winner.
I gotta sell for now, man. I'll put a hold on it because I think it's possible. I think there's a scenario that it could happen, but I'm gonna sell it for now. But I would put a hold on it possibly as well.
Last one, Ryan. Forgive me for this one. This is from T-Bed 56. Buy, sell, or hold. Are we buying or selling Ryan's most recent I'm going to be nicer on Twitter initiative? Personally, I am selling here.
I already sold because I literally said in that thread, whoops, because somebody started saying something ignorant. So I quote tweeted them. So yes, it's over with already.
It's impossible to be that way on
minutes.
Twitter, Ryan. If you're going to engage with, if you're just going to do what I usually do and just post stories, then it's easy to do. But the minute I start responding to people like yesterday, was so many idiots on Twitter yesterday talking about Notre Dame is not going to get a bye as if that's new. It's like, I just can't help myself. People are stupid and they need to be called
I think
sometime.
Every time I make a tweet now, I think I'm just going to set it to mute that tweet so I don't have to see anybody say anything, honestly. That's kind of my next step. So
there you go. Well, that's going to do it, Ryan. We did have a couple super chats I just want to bring up here real quick from Jim Halloran. Okay. Thank you for the super chat, Jim. Man. Buy, sell, or hold. Here's my penalty donation. Thanks for all you do. So not sure my buy, sell, or hold follows the rules. So I'm going to have to go buy or see if I can find Jim's buy, sell, or hold. So I don't know what your buy, sell, or hold was, Jim, because we weren't taking any from the group. But let me see if I can find his buy, sell. I can't find his buy, sell, or hold. I think it had something to do with Joe Rudolph's coaching fly, perhaps. I'm not quite sure, Jim. So here we go. Buy, sell, or hold. Joe Rudolph steps up his coaching in 2024.
Yeah, I buy it because I think that it's just a year 2 maturation, if nothing else. If everything exactly the same as it was last year, you're just going to see guys in a second year under a offensive line coach take a step forward. So I will buy that one. Yes, Jim.
And the last one, Ryan, this is from Christopher Hardy. Says, came in late. Okay. Thank you for the super chat, by the way, Christopher. We appreciate that very much. Came in late. Sorry if this was already asked. Buy, sell, or hold. The 2024 defense has more interceptions than the 2023 defense. For the record, that means they would need more than 16 interceptions.
I'm buying that one. I'm buying because I think that yes, you're not gonna see as many most likely with a Xavier Watts. You're not gonna see him have 7, but I think a couple of the guys that you replaced, although Cam Hart was excellent and Thomas Harper was rock solid at nickel, I do think you're putting a couple new guys in there that might have better ball skills and might be able to create some more turnovers. So I think you're gonna supplement the loss of maybe Xavier Watts not having as many, but I think that you're eventually going to get over that number because I think there's a lot of ball skills in that secondary, man. A lot of guys that I think can create some turnovers.
I'm with you on that, and I think that not only that, Ryan, I do expect an even more. I think the pass rush is going to take an even bigger jump this year. I think they're going to keep building and getting better and better these next 3 years, and not only it's the combination for me, Ryan. It's yes, there's better ball skills in the secondary this year. I think Rod Hurd's going to have much better ball skills, and Adon Schuler, whoever those two guys are going to have better ball skills than the combination of DJ Brown and Ramon Henderson. It's going to be harder to avoid Xavier Watts by the end of the year. I think people are going to do it early in the year. Benjamin Morrison obviously has very good ball skills, but now you're going to have better ball skills on the other side with Jaden Mickey and Christian Gray both have better ball skills than Cam Hart. They may not be the same all-around players that Cam Hart was, and I would argue they're not going to be next year.
Sure.
From a pure ball skills standpoint, there's no doubt. That's the biggest knock that NFL teams have on Cam outside of the injury history is can he make more plays in the football? And so we'll see that. But on top of that, I think it's going to be a more impactful pass rush this season. I do. Because I think it's going to be an even longer, more athletic front seven. Will the linebackers be as good as J.D. Bertrand and Marist and Jack Kaiser were last year? Maybe not. Are they going to be bigger and more explosive and more athletic? Yes, they will be. The defensive line is going to be more athletic, in my opinion. Josh Burnham and R.J. Oben may not be a better duo than overall than what Javonte and Nana were last year, but they're going to be better pass rushers, in my opinion. They're going to be they're more explosive athletically. So I think the combination of the two is why I'm with you. I'm on board on that one, Ryan. I am a buy. I think they will have more interceptions this year. I think they're also going to have more recovered fumble. I think this team is going to force a lot of turnovers because I think they're also going to have more. They were in the top, I think, 5 nationally last year, Ryan, in forced fumbles, but they weren't very good at recovering them. I'm actually going to look that up because I believe I'm correct on that. Notre Dame had ranked tied for second in college football last year with 18 forced fumbles. That's a lot. The problem is they didn't recover a lot of them, and they ranked 44th in recovered fumbles. So got to pick up on some of those balls, man. But yeah, I think they're going to be a very impactful defense this year. So, Mr. Roberts, that's going to do it, man. Any other buy, sell, or holds that you want to ask that you feel good or do? I think the chat nailed them, man. I think the board, I should say, nailed them. I think we had some really good ones, man. That's some really good ones.
Had a couple super chats in at the end too.
Yeah,
so, a lot of
Well, that's going to do it for today's show, folks. 6 o'clock tonight, obviously, we're going to have a Notre Dame midweek mailbag from the team of Sean Stiers and those guys, Vince and Jesse. I'll be back tomorrow with a solo show. Going to have some things to talk about. I'm going to preview the Notre Dame running backs. Will certainly be one of the topics that I'll discuss tomorrow. So I'll be back with you guys again. And then Friday, Ryan and Sean will be together for the Notre Dame recruiting show, the Notre Dame recruiting hour. And so jam-packed. And, of course, Sean and I will be back on Saturday for our new RTCF show. So we got a busy week coming up. And, of course, we're going to have some intel on the board coming up. Ryan's already put some intel on the board. You're going to want to join the message board, folks. I'm going to challenge you again. Sign up and give us 2 months. Give us through spring ball. $4.99 a month. It'll cost you less than $10. It'll cost you less than a Big Mac meal at McDonald's for 2 months worth of IB content. If you haven't signed up, I'm telling you, check it out. boards.irishbreakdown.com. I think you're going to be hooked. But give us a shot. And it's also just a way to support Irish Breakdown and what we're doing here at IB. So definitely give us a whirl. So Ryan, great show, man. This is a great idea. Just so y'all know, this is 100% Ryan's idea. I think this is a great idea. And I also think we might make this a regular thing, or at least a more consistent thing, because this was an awesome show, Ryan. Just a great show. The chat did a great job. We'll always do it with members only. I think it's just something to kind of school as a shout out to the people that are the premium members. So I don't know if it'll be a weekly thing or if it'll be, what it's going to be, but it brings a little bit of different flavor than the mailbag, I think, Ryan. You know what I mean? Because it's just a little bit of a different deal. So we'll do this a little bit more often. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do it again. So great idea, Mr. Roberts. That's going to do it for today's show, everybody. Thank you all so much. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, sign up for the message boards, give us a 5-star review, sign up for our newsletter as well. If you haven't done so, you can buy some of the merch stuff. All the great things we have to offer at Irish Breakdown. For Ryan, I'm Brian. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. And we'll talk to you again very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.